Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Antry. I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And we're actually starting early this week. So we're
throwing people for a loop.
making up for last week. Technical difficulties.
I'm having the same technical difficulties. I paid like $60 for this program to do all this video stuff, and
Yes.
I can't get it to work. So I'm using the free program that I couldn't get on the PC, but now I'm using a Mac, and whatever. I'm mad. Generally better.
Well, hello to everyone who is tuning in.
Hello. Hold on. Let me fix this. No, I'm going to fix it a little bit more. That's right.
Good
You're going to
timing.
watch me adjust stuff. That's what's happening on this podcast right now. If
Or
you're
listen
watching
to it,
live
as
on the
the case might
YouTube
be.
or listening to this, I'm sorry. This is the sort of thing we have to deal with every once in a while. We do not edit this podcast. The only time I edit this podcast is if somebody says a bad word on accident, usually me. It actually
It's
hasn't
very
happened.
rare.
It hasn't happened in years. The last one who did it was Liz. That's how long
Yes.
ago it was. I made her edit her side out. And the only other editing that goes on is if we somehow get out of sync because of issues.
Sure.
Which
You know,
has happened.
I very rarely, I think, maybe people will correct me if this is not true, but I very rarely think that I pat ourselves on the back about anything we do on this podcast. But I would like to invite anyone to try to talk for 2 hours without editing.
It's not as easy as it sounds.
That's a lot of talking for 2 hours without editing. So
I sometimes listen to people on the radio, on NPR or whatever, and they use so many clutch words that it's almost impossible to listen to them for longer than a couple of seconds because they just scribble this that because so this and stuff like that. I have my own clutch words which I use all the time. I think they flow pretty well. I don't really hear anybody complaining about them. I am also a member of Toastmasters, which is a group that works on public speaking. So now I have people once a week count the number of times I say or or so or
it's
anyways.
helpful.
It is. It's making me much more aware. So I'm trying to even improve myself over the top of what we're already doing. I don't notice you using clutch words at all. So
Oh, I hear it. When I listen
like
back to the podcast, I hear myself.
do you really? I don't really hear it. I think you do a fantastic job.
I've got too many things on my mind. Sometimes I hear myself using it. I go, oh, but well, too late now. It's out there and recorded.
What's not going to happen is Tom's not going to go back through and edit. Now, the first couple of episodes of this podcast, which are lost to posterity, were full of them, and I would go through and edit it out for the first couple of. Now, remember, there were only 20 minutes back then, so
Right.
I would edit out all the
Actually
that
manageable.
I would do. And I quickly got to the point where like this is for the birds. I'm not doing that anymore. And I started just concentrating on not saying them as much. It has definitely helped. It's definitely helped. So I'm very happy that we can do 2 hours of this without me having to edit it. Because believe me, this podcast would have ended about 2.5 years ago if I had to edit all that. What? Yeah, actually, let me see. Or 9 years, 8.5 years ago, this podcast would have ended. So, yes, this is AV Rant, the podcast where we answer your AV and home theater questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. That is the main question line. That line will go to our producer, Austin, who takes the questions and puts them into our podcast queue. We mostly answered them chronologically, though we are starting, by my request, starting to group them a little bit for reasons that will become clear in the near future. But you're also welcome to email us directly at rob@avrant.com, tom@avrant.com. Rob, of course, will answer you.
Please don't promise that I will answer anyone.
Not-
I do when I can. I
He
try.
does.
I do my best.
If you get an answer from Rob, you will be answered. You will be like you have never been answered before. It's like the time you asked your wife, "How was your day, hon?" And she started crying. It's like that. You're like, "Oh no, what have I done? And I'm going to be here forever." So someone's like, "Oh, I better pour her some wine or something." But Rob's too far away to pour wine, and I don't think he drinks anyway.
I don't.
Rob will sometimes answer your question. Well, we will answer your question on the podcast. You can also go to www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. Go to facebook.com/avrantpodcast, where we and our listeners are very active in answering and taking questions. Twitter at First Reflect for Rob, at avrant_Tom for me, and at Austin Pond, TN Pond for our producer Austin, who also has his own podcast. It is a podcast called We Watch Movies. It's actually a podcast about pleather.
Okay.
Pleather. Yeah, not
Yeah,
leather.
We watch movies. It's about pleather. I see the
Pleather.
connection.
There's a connection.
Mhm.
It's tenuous, but you know, it started off as a podcast which was much more obvious. You know, we watch movies. It was about carpet, but it slowly morphed into pleather
Right.
over the years.
Just where the course of things took them.
That's how it goes.
Yes, we did have someone write in and thanked us for describing what We Watch Movies is about every week, because it is a very confusing title.
It is. I don't know what
no one could guess.
No, it's like XKCD. You're like, how do you say it? You can't. Yeah. It's not the way it goes. Yes. So let's start off this podcast as we always do, thanking our listeners of the week. Our listeners of the week you can become our listener of the week in one of two ways. The first way is how James, Gary, Jonathan, Nathan, Edward, and Trent all did. They went to www.avrant.com, clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and which linked them up to a PayPal donation site, and they donated to the podcast. That money goes into the podcast coffers to pay for hosting charges and Libsyn for where we store our podcasts and all that. So eventually it's going to probably buy Rob some speakers he'll put into a
I don't need speakers. That's not.
Yeah.
Maybe think of other things, but
like OLED that you've been eyeballing.
Oh, that would be nice. That would that would be some donations.
That would require. Let's say at the current rate of donations, Rob. By the time we could buy you one now, we will be able to buy you one then. At that point,
exceedingly obsolete. Yes.
Yes.
Well, I want to say James, Gary, and that is Infinite Gary, by the way.
That is Infinite Gary.
Jonathan, Nathan, Edward, and Trent. Thank you guys all so much. Very generous of you, and much appreciated. So
we are also, I believe, is the different James. I believe that is has contacted us about supporting the podcast in a different way.
Yeah, we have like 4 Jameses.
Yeah,
now,
we're thick with Jameses these days.
James is the straight. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't know who you are, whatever, that was James D. That was our listener of the week. If that helps. This other James has been in contact. He has asked for our logo because he's going to do something with it. So once we figure out what that is exactly and have something to share about that, he will be our listener of the week by supporting the podcast in his own way. If some people email the manufacturers when they buy some gear and let them know, or the retailer let them know that AV Rant was there. And we have a race car, right? Yep. That race car driver, he slaps our logo on his race car, and believe me, very little in my life I think I was more proud and excited about that than I was when my third child. My third child, I was like, what? Again? Haven't we already done this? Didn't we learn our lesson? But I was really excited about the race car.
We're going to put an AV Rant logo on him, and then you'll be proud.
It's a fantastic idea. Let's do that. Let's brand my
AV Rant kid.
You should not name your child AV Rant. Let's just go with that. Don't do that. That is not a good support. I would so talk it up, but that is not a good support of the podcast. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about the ecobee, the thermostat thing. I've got a lot more experience with it now. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it's not really too relevant to this podcast. The thing is, it's sort of like the Nest in that it's wire. It's connects to your Wi-Fi, and you can access it offline or online from different places in the world or whatever. Really kind of love it. It has worked out pretty well. The biggest problem has been that the sensor that's in the home theater is literally all the way across the house from the stupid thing.
Right.
So it's right at the border of where it will.
The wireless signals. So
it connected for a bit, and then it stopped. So they had me switch out the batteries. I contacted customer support, switch out the batteries to see if maybe it was a battery thing, and that did seem to help. I'll probably buy a new battery for the thing. Right now it loses and picks up connection all the time. I don't really care as long as it occasionally knows whether or not there's somebody in here. There's 2 other sensors in the house, and that's fine. So, and I've been moving them around a little bit. If I have a recommendation, if you are going to get this, do not attach them to your wall until you're absolutely sure that's where you want them to be. They give you the little sticker thing that's supposed to, you pull the tab off, you stick it to the back, you pull the tab off and stick it to the wall. Yeah, that didn't work for crap for me. Oh yeah, that thing was on the ground in 30 seconds.
Yeah, no.
But if you can just find like a table or something to put it on in the little included stands, use the stands for a bit and make sure that, because I of course was like, I know where I'm going to put these things and put them up there. And I went, only one of the places I put them, I ended up leaving them there. I had to move the other 2 and then spackle and paint. So don't be a Tom in this game. All right. In the news via Antoine over on Twitter. You let us know that Def Tech or Definitive Technologies has introduced their new BP9000 Series speakers. 4 towers from 650 each up to 1750 each. Yeah, because they always price those each, don't they?
Yeah, they are. Well, they price them each. I mean, that's fair enough. You know what they are. So yes, anywhere from what 1,300 a pair to 3,500 a pair. There's 4 different towers.
Yeah, they got 3 centers from 500 to 1,000. I guess that's 5, 750, and 1,000. That's what I'm
something like that. Yep,
probably 700 or something like that. 2 bipole surrounds, 250 and 350 each, and then 1 Atmos module, a 250 each, and 0 bookshelf models. So
yeah,
suck it, guys.
I mentioned that because that's a little unusual in a speaker lineup. You very often see bookshelf and tower models. However, the reason's kind of clear with Definitive Technology because the speakers are all bipole, meaning they have drivers on the front and the back of the speaker. Not the case for the center channels, of course, but for the towers, they are all bipole. The surrounds that can be mounted on walls are the trapezoidal shape, and they are bipole as well. So you could make a bipole bookshelf speaker, but I guess they figure people will probably put it in an actual bookshelf in some instances.
No one
and that
should
would not
ever
work
put
so
a
well.
bookshelf speaker in the bookshelf. That's a ridiculous thing. First of all, bookshelves are usually not deep enough to put a bookshelf speaker on. It's just a name. We shouldn't call them that.
I know.
We should call them something else.
Well, monitors. That's what we often call them. Anyway, that's the new
lineup.
Right,
all the towers are bipoles with powered subwoofer drivers and an integrated attachment system on top for the optional Atmos module.
Yeah, that's all of them except for the most expensive of the towers, which already has the Atmos module built in, and it is not removable in that model. So you can get it whether you want it or not.
I guess you don't have to hook it up if you don't want to.
No, you don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to wire it up, but it's there. You've paid for it.
You know what's going to happen? Somebody is going to buy that speaker and like some audiophile, and then they're going to try wire it. They're going to wire the bottom, wire the middle, and then wire the top one up there. All with the same information. They just talk about how much more spacious it is. Now that it just sounds
shooting up at the ceiling.
It sounds higher now, or taller.
I do believe Antoine, who forwarded this information to us, he must do something on the web because he was like, this is a terrible thing that Definitive Technology has done with their web address, because instead of it just being their regular, I think it's deftech.com is their actual, I forget what it is, but anyway, their regular site and then just like /BP9000, which is what you would expect. They actually set up an entirely separate website just for this one series of speaker. So he was like, yeah, that's not a good way to manage your online addresses. Well, here I was just talking about not pausing. Tom has frozen on my screen. If anyone is watching the live YouTube, he's probably talking away. We might be talking over one another at this very moment. I will see if he comes back shortly. We will pause for a moment, and hopefully Tom's internet connection will reconnect. The last time this happened, his router had died. So despite getting a new computer, maybe he didn't get a new router like he should have. Yes, indeed. Tom has completely dropped out. I don't know if I'm still broadcasting live to anyone. I can't quite tell. But yeah, Tom has dropped out. Hopefully he is just resetting and will come back in shortly. I'll let the stream continue. Alrighty, so looking at what information I have, Tom is not showing up online right now within the Google system, so I am sure he is resetting and will hopefully be back soon. Here we go. Okay, so Ray has chimed in to let me know that I'm still on the air, so therefore I'm still talking to all of you, and I don't know what will become of this YouTube video once it loads up. And look at that, Tom is back. I
I
didn't go beyond the news story. We can pick right up at the end of that.
I'm gonna buy a router right after this pod's done.
I speculated that might be what it is. Apparently,
I am not. I'm not impressed with what I just had to deal with. Not impressed.
The YouTube feed has continued on apparently, so we can pick right up at our comment section.
Let me just see here. So, let's see, 15 minutes, someplace around 15. Right. Okay. In comments today, we've got Infinite Gary, who shared an article describing the laborious process of producing Ultra HD Blu-rays. I want to say that the most laborious thing was trying to read that article because of all the pop-ups on that thing, trying to get you to sign up for newsletters and to look at this thing, and don't you want to take our whatever? And I was like, you know what? I don't even want to read this article this badly, so I didn't. So you're gonna have to tell us what it's about because I didn't read it because I was mad that whatever broadcasting cable. Which, by the way, I used to use that website all the time as a web source, and now I won't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically they were describing what has been a years-long process of getting everything ready for an entirely new format, which is like, well, yeah, but now that you've figured out how to do it, it should go a lot easier from here on out. Yes, like so the headline kind of makes it sound like, oh, creating an Ultra HD Blu-ray title is a laborious process. It's like, no, it was to get to this point. Of course it was. It's a brand new disc format. You had new codecs to deal with, all the licensing things to work out. You've got new immersive audio formats. You've got HDR, which we've never had before. We've got a wider color gamut with all being put into this BT 2020 container, which is something we've never had before. So it's like, yeah, figuring all that out took some time and effort, but it's done now, so moving forward, it should not be any more complicated than what ultimately DVD or Blu-ray became. Guess what? Those took a lot of effort to get off the ground initially, too.
I bet VHS didn't just soar right along, did it?
But no, I mean, it's true also, that there were quite a few changes they had to go through, things that they had to get used to, and, they've decided, like, this was talking about, what is it, Universal or Paramount? Paramount, yeah.
Paramount.
Who just announced that their first titles are going to be the Star Trek, the newer ones, Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness, and so they did everything from the ground up. They remastered everything from the ground up because it's all new format. We got to get used to it. They redid the Atmos soundtrack, even though it was Atmos in the theater. They redid it from the ground up for the home. So they went through the whole thing, but basically to teach themselves how to do it, and now they can move forward.
Yeah, and the thing right now that we've been noting on a number of releases is that there is usually on the Ultra Blu-ray version, it's just got the movie and very little else, and that's simply because of space. Right now they don't have the 100 gigabyte triple layer discs available to send out, and even if they did, I'm not even sure. I think that the players should be able to read them no matter what size they are.
This is iffy, isn't it? I'm like, is that Samsung? I mean, are we sure it will read the triple layer discs?
We don't know for sure, but I remember doing research about this a long time ago, and when I did, it indicated to me that yes, you could just put the 100 gigabyte discs in there and it would be fine.
Should be.
That's what they said.
But yeah, all of the releases so far have been on the dual layer 66 gigabyte discs, and therefore they have not been putting any special features on. They've got just enough space for they even said if the movie was 3 hours long, it wouldn't fit on the 66 gigabyte discs. So some of the longer movies that are out there, they're waiting for those 100. And there was sort of a tidbit, this was in like a German article, but they mentioned that the 100 gigabyte discs are on track to be released in August of this year, like the actual manufacturing of them. So looking forward to that. Yeah.
All right, Nelson over on Facebook, and this was a great picture that he put up there, by the way. So if you're not a member of our Facebook group or page, if you don't like our page, you should definitely do that. Anyways, Nelson replaced his AV receiver only to have it shut off every explosion, gunshot, or music swell. Remembering our advice, he checked all of his speaker wire connections for 2 hours on the back of his AV receiver because he switched his AV receiver. That's where you check. Because clearly that's the problem. But when he couldn't find the problem, he finally started unplugging speakers one at a time. He discovered that the stray wire isn't always where you think it's going to be. And he's got a picture of this wire, and it's just full on touching, man. It's not even close.
I mean, it's not like it's the entire like thing of speaker
No.
wire. It's
One strand.
little strand out of the thing. Leaning over. Yup, that's what it is. He says he's got 11 speakers, so he's like, that's 22 binding posts he's got to check. And it was, of course, the last one.
I know it, man. So Jeb also wanted to let us know that last week when we talked about that curved TV that was sitting in that cubby,
Yeah.
that wasn't his. It was at a customer's house though,
Yeah,
and the TV is just sitting on its stand. It's not using a wall mount. It's just kind of tucked in there.
That looks so precarious.
I know,
that I'm looking at it. I'm like, really? That is just standing.
But honestly,
the
bulk of the weight is way back where the stand is.
That's right.
So
That's true. Yep.
it should be fine. Should be fine. That being said, no, I'm not comfortable with this.
I know.
So a flat TV, of course, wouldn't have been able to use the stand at all, but because it's curved, it does work. Which
it just fit.
bizarre.
Just fit. There you go. On the one instance where it made sense to have a curved TV.
I'd rather cut a bigger hole. All right, Nathan. These are our first questions here for this week. Well, whatever. First thing he asks, will be reviewing the new Aperion Verus 2 Grand speakers? It's hard to tell what's different from the original Verus Grands, apart from the tweeter, based on specs. Also, why do we think the Verus 2s aren't getting the level of fanfare the originals got around their release? I don't know. Maybe because it's such a
several of them. Models are still pre-order. That's probably one reason. It looks like they had one shipment come in because the towers and the bookshelves were available for a little while, and then now it says they're back on pre-order status. So I think they had like one trial container come in.
And it's an iterative. This is an iterative thing. It's not really a huge. It was huge when they released this because it was a completely different line of speakers, and people were excited to see what they had. And putting out a Verus 2 is like, hey, well, it's a little bit better than the last one. So we're like, oh, great. Yeah. I'm glad you should do that.
I don't know what they've changed either. Clearly they have updated the tweeter. But other than that, I'm not sure what else has been changed. But yeah, I mean, this is a little bit like, go back to the early days of AV Rant. There was a lot of talk of Axiom Audio. Well, Axiom Audio has had like the same model lineup for so many years. They continue to update it. It's not like they haven't updated it and changed out drivers and stuff, but it doesn't get nearly the fanfare as when it was new.
And they'll even tell you when they update it, they'll say, well, we changed this and changed that, but they sound the same.
Yeah.
So what's the difference then? Well, the difference is that they needed a new source for these, wherever they were buying their tweeters from before, it no longer makes them, or it became too expensive. So now they're going to buy these other cheaper tweeters over here, but they made sure they sound the same. So what's to get excited about there? I don't know. Aperion has not contacted me for a review. I don't think they will. I don't see any reason why they would, but I could try to get them to send me a pair of their bookshelves.
Or they are one of the companies that does free shipping both ways. So if you wanted to, you could just buy some and send them back.
I don't do that.
You got 60 days with them, so it's pretty good.
I know. Look how long it's taking me to get this stupid.
I know. SVS one. You'd be past the 45-day limit with them, I think.
I know. Last week, Nathan was looking for thoughts on uninterruptible power supplies and power conditioners. I guess / not or. For the short term, he wants / needs a UPS for his projector, but wants long term to have something to mount in his gear rack that has either upgradability or compatibility with a Crestron Control 4 type system. Does something like the APC S20 fit these requirements, or maybe a Crestron CEN-UPS1250 or an APC S20. He spoke to Crestron and they said that the whatever that thing is will work as a standalone unit.
Right.
So since last week, Nathan has made his decision, and I guess with your help probably. But for other AV Rant listeners, what are the benefits of network controllable UPS units?
Yeah, so I mean, that's what sets apart the Crestron unit, which actually is just a rebadged APC S20.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
They are the same, and they don't make any bones about it. They're like, this is an APC unit. They're quite proud of that because APC makes great battery backup units. Right. So the S20 and the Crestron rebadged version of it, the claim to fame there is that they are network accessible. You can individually turn on the outlets, and there are 12 of them. You can individually turn them on via network commands, and it can also give you status data. It'll tell you how much power is being drawn when there were power faults, like every time that the voltage regulator kicked in, it keeps a log of that. So it's got all that type of data, and that way, if you have a home automation system like Crestron Control 4, you can turn off things that are otherwise just sucking down vampire power because you're not using them, or you can have a log of things, or you can say when this happens, like when this amount of power is drawn, make sure to turn on this other thing, right? Like if you got active fans or something, that's a way you could control them. So, those are the benefits of it, but the price is a huge delta in price because like the S20, like retail, it's like $2,000. You can usually find them for like $1,400, but you're talking $1,400 for essentially a battery backup with 12 outlets on it. Yes, it's network controllable, which not a lot of other things are, but that's a big amount of money to pay for that. So make sure you really need it.
I can't think of a single reason why I would need one of these things. To be absolutely dead honest with you, this is like, I also don't need like a surge protector or my toaster to be network accessible. There'll be an occasion where it'll be like, I just left the house, did I leave the toaster on? And maybe
that's the thing, like you can log into this remotely and just say turn everything off.
Right. You can't, and I understand that, but I just how often are you really going to need to do that? Number one, and if you do, that's fine. Believe me, but I think most people, I don't ever go behind my devices and turn off the surge protector. I never do that.
Right.
Some people seem to be very good. If you read the comments about any given device on Amazon, there will invariably be somebody that's complaining about the fact that it doesn't automatically shut off or do this or do that because how much power it's drawing. It's not drawing any. I mean, come on, it's not.
It's drawing something.
It's drawing something. But if you really think your problem is that, then stop running your AC, okay, or your heater, because that's really is a much bigger draw than these things.
Yeah, I mean, for most people, the unit that I like to recommend most highly, it's still from APC, but it's called the J35B. It goes for under $350 most places that you can buy it from. Now, that's still a fair amount of money, but do keep in mind, you're essentially getting a car battery. Like, that's the type of battery that's in here because it needs to be able to power an actual system for, it's not doing it for only a couple minutes. I mean, you wouldn't want to, like, sit down and watch a movie off of battery power, but the idea is that if you have a brownout and you have, say, your DVR connected to this, recording a show, it will keep running for like 2.5 hours off of battery power if that's the only thing that's turned on. You've turned off your sound system and your TV and you just let it run. So it's very nice. I love it. I have power outages out at my place all the time because they're constantly building new buildings around here. So they're always like turning off the power because they're hooking up a new building. Convenient. Yeah. So, I mean, it's saved a gazillion recordings for me. So it's extremely convenient. And then for a projector, if the power ever goes out, saves your lamp because it lets the cooling fan keep going. So I really like that J35. And the J35 has a feature, which is that it has one master outlet and two separate banks of slave outlets, so that if your concern is vampire power and you're like, look, when I turn off my TV, you should automatically disconnect my AV receiver because clearly I'm not using it. Or if it's a computer system, when I turn off my main PC, automatically power down the hard drives or something like that I have plugged in. So you can set that with two separate banks so you don't have to use all of them, so that when the master device turns off, it automatically turns off the slave devices. So it has that much for under $350. For most people, I think that's probably enough.
I can't imagine people needing much more than that. But if you've got a reason for it, please don't let me make it.
Right.
Don't think that I'm insulting you while all I'm doing is saying, I just think for most people it's not very
just to be aware of the price delta.
Return on investment there.
Yeah, it's $1,000 price delta.
Just to be able to look at it and say, you had to regulate the power 15 times yesterday. Right. I wonder what I can do about that. Oh, that's right. A big fat nothing. So thanks. All right. Anyways, he also looked into the TiVo OTA 1 terabyte we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and it seemed like a good deal compared to something like a Channel Master. However, it only mentions having RF control. Is there some way to make it work with his IR-based Harmony hub? Now, before we go on, because these questions, some of them have been answered already.
Right.
But we both looked at this thing. I looked at it before the podcast last week. You looked at it before the podcast. We both looked at it after the podcast last week. And it doesn't say anywhere on there that IR control is available. You look at the remote and you're like, that's got to be an IR remote as well.
It's got to be, because it's the same TiVo remote they've had for a while, which is both RF and IR.
It just got to be, but it doesn't say it anywhere. So our thing was going to be to say, you're going to have to contact TiVo and find out. So Nathan did that. He contacted TiVo's customer service department directly, and they informed him that the TiVo OTA does have an IR sensor. He's using a Harmony hub, but all of his gear is in a rack. He prefers wired IR jacks when they're available. The TiVo OTA does not offer that type of connection. So it's his best option to physically stick one of the Harmony hub's IR blaster extenders to the TiVo's OTA's IR sensor, or is just having it in the rack along with the Harmony hub going to be okay? Well, the hub itself blasts out all the IR.
Yeah.
So it's
and
very
it really blasts it out.
I have it sitting right next to my Xbox. My kids keep pushing it back. I don't know why they do that. I think it's because they slide the discs in there. But I have it kind of sitting on the front of my rack and right in like to the right, and maybe not even the whole width of the hub in front of that thing. And it controls everything just fine, including everything below it. And I have one of the little IR things kind of out in the room just to make sure it hits the projector. Because it wasn't
one of the little extenders, sure.
Yeah, it wasn't really hitting the projector. I think that if you just stick it in your rack, like towards the front on the ground or something like that, depending on where you have this thing, or, just take one of those, a couple of those IR things and put it nearby, you're not going to have any problems. I mean,
one little trick is to look at the blaster through a camera, through like a camcorder or even your phone's camera, because those will react to infrared light. Of course, your human eye doesn't, but the camera will. And it's like turning on and off a light. It's blinking, and it's like if you are in a dark room and then you turn on a light and then turn off the light, you don't have to be in a direct path to notice that the light turned on and off. And that's what it is. It's flooding that whole space with infrared light. Or a human eye can't see it, but it's a blast coming out of that Harmony hub. If you're super worried about it, I'm assuming I don't know, maybe his rack is in his home theater room, maybe it's in a separate room. If it's in a separate room, if you put a mirror somewhere, it'll like reflect off the mirror because it's light.
Right. So if it's behind like a door,
or if
like
it's a closet or something,
you could literally just get like that Mylar stuff and just tape it up there.
Aluminum foil.
Well, that's true. Aluminum foil, do it too. There you go. You go really old school. Lots of manufacturers have been branding the projectors as 4K UHD compatible or Wobble K compatible for some time. I don't know what Wobble K is, but
that's like E-shift.
I know what it is. I know what it is, but I like it. Now that there are true UHD projectors coming out, have we seen any reviews comparing the picture quality from true 4K projectors to the old faux K projectors? I like Wobble K better.
Yeah.
Have you? Because I haven't read them.
Yeah. Well, it's only Sony. Sony's the only one right this second in the consumer market, and we're talking $10,000 and up still, right? So there are other genuine 4K projectors out there, but they were like essentially commercial projectors in the like $100,000 plus range, or at least probably 50, 60,000. Yeah. So now we are starting to see some, at least they're coming down to $10,000 or around that point. And so when those reviews have been done at places like projectorreviews.com or projectorcentral.com, they absolutely make a comparison to the ones like the Epson LS10000 or the JVC models, which use the shifting panel. And so by and large, they've said, look, if you put them side by side and you put up like, test grade 4K footage, or like just, test patterns that are 4K resolution, something designed specifically to show all the detail possible in a 4K signal, and you have the Sony genuine 4K panel side by side with one of these ones that is wobbling the panel, they're like, the genuine 4K panel looks slightly sharper. That has been the opinion by and large. But they've also, of course, put the ones that are wobbling the panel next to just a straight 1080p panel, and they're like, oh, there's a pretty clear jump in detail going from the 1080p panel to the one that is wobbling. And I mean, you are genuinely getting more dots of light on the screen because you are physically having the panel move in a wobbling motion at like 120 frames a second instead of 60, right?
Right.
So it's there, but by and large, they've said the genuine 4K panels are ever so slightly sharper, but if you do not have them side by side, you would never pick it out. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
That's kind of what I expected. We're gonna I'm gonna hear from one of our listeners, hopefully this podcast, who has one of those Wobble K ones that we will talk about. Johnny gave up his Pioneer VSX 1021 AV receiver to his brother-in-law, or gave his, not gave up his, to his brother-in-law. They are using it to power a 5.1 setup. in his entertainment room, plus 2 speakers outside using the Assignable Zone 2 inputs or outputs. Sorry. All of Johnny's brother-in-law's sources are connected via HDMI. It's got a cable box, Apple TV, a Chromecast, Amazon Fire Stick, and Roku 3. And apparently, because he is enamored with streaming, that is a lot of It seems like
many ways of streaming. Yes,
I don't understand why you need all these things. To be honest with you, you kind of only need one of these things.
I mean, to be absolutely fair, iTunes is only available on the Apple TV.
It's true.
Amazon Fire Stick, although Amazon is available on the Roku 3, Amazon Fire Stick is probably still the best way to get it. Chromecasting, I think, is available through some of the other ones, but I'm not sure. And then Roku 3 definitely has some services that aren't available on any of the others, because Roku has like way more streaming services than everyone else. So you can kind of make an argument if you use a lot of different services that you actually kind of do.
I mean, it seems like you should be able to get most of that stuff on the Roku. Like everything but iTunes. It seems like you only need Roku and
Chromecast, maybe. I don't know.
No, right.
I think the new Roku 4 even does Google Cast. I think. Gosh, somebody will correct us on that.
All right. Anyways, none of these sources will play in Zone 2.
Yeah.
Johnny did some research online and discovered that Zone 2 on this particular AV receiver, this Pioneer model, only works when using 2-channel analog signals, which means it doesn't have a DAC. Basically, he read that it does not have multiple. Oh, here we go. Multiple internal DACs, so only analog works in Zone 2. Is this for real? Yes, it is totally for real.
Is not uncommon.
It's not uncommon. Well, no, especially with lower end models, it's definitely not uncommon there. But this has been the case for so many years.
Yes,
and it's very frustrating, but it's a cost cutting measure. First of all, most of you don't use Zone 2. Let's all be honest here. We don't do it. Almost none of us do. Those of us that do will run into this problem and complain about it, and they'll go, yeah, you get like the first complaint we've gotten in months. So they don't do anything about it.
Or they'll just say, well, hook up your red and white analog stereo audio out.
That's right.
You can't do from these boxes that only have an HDMI connection.
That's right. When you only have an HDMI connection, this is going to be a problem. So anyways, none of these sources will play blah, 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 blah. They did manage to get a $15 optical to RCA converter box, and that allowed them to use an older Apple TV model that had an optical outlet output, but only that one source would play in Zone 2.
Sure.
He quoting as saying summer was saved. Okay.
At least they could get music
outside.
Which was the whole point.
Anyways, he's now upgraded the new Apple TV, unfortunately, which does not have an optical connection. Right. So how can he get all of these HDMI sources to play in Zone 2? He could get an HDMI to RCA converter box, but that he would only be able to connect it to one source. So he'd have to buy multiple boxes.
Yeah,
basically, which seems cost prohibitive.
Yeah, so, they're not super expensive, but they are like $45 a pop. So
if he's got like
five sources,
that's like that's $250. You almost buy yourself a new receiver at Accessories for Less that will do it for you, and not have 5 stacks of these boxes, which are probably going to, at least one of them is going to break within a couple of months.
A lot of RCA cables too.
Yeah, it's a lot of RCA cables. So yeah, I think the best solution that I can come up with is to buy a new receiver and make sure that it has DACs on Zone 2.
But there's stuff to that too, which gets into the second.
All right, let me keep reading then, I guess.
Yeah.
Should he try to convince his brother-in-law to buy an entirely new AV receiver? If so, which one? Obviously, he wants something that could take all of these HDMI sources to play them in Zone 2. Are there any older, cheaper models out there that can do that? He has zero interest in 4K, HDCP 2.2, Atmos, etc. So no need to consider those things.
Right. So I did more research on this than I anticipated, because I was like, oh, I think this... Wait, no, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work either. That was the case researching this. So yeah, you were not alone in your frustration on this, Johnny. So I went to Yamaha first, because Yamaha traditionally has been the ones that like have dealt with zones better than pretty much any other brand. Well, sure enough, they have some inexpensive ones, like this is going back to their RXV 577 or the RXV 579. Those can both be found on Accessories for Less. They're not super expensive. And they have a thing that they call Zone B. And if you're like, hey, didn't there used to be front A and B speakers, and now I don't see any front B speakers, but I see something called Zone B? Yeah, because that's exactly what it is. They just relabeled front B to Zone B instead. That's all they did. That's all it is.
Yeah, and I remember that. I remember when they did that, and I was like, what? It took me a while to figure that one out, too.
So it is kind of handy in that you can have an HDMI source it can be playing in 5.1 surround sound out of zone A, right? Your traditional zone. And then it can use the extra 2 channels, the ones that could be surround back speakers, or you can assign them to zone B. And when you do that, it will internally take like a Dolby Digital 5.1 signal, it will down mix it to 2 channel, and it will play it out of the zone B speakers at the very same time that it's playing 5.1 out of zone A, or independently you can have zone B on without zone A turned on. So that's kind of cool. But there's, of course, the big catch. If you've thought about this, you can't have something different playing in zone A simultaneously with something different playing in zone B. They must either be playing the same thing at the same time or one or the other. Now, Johnny got back to me by email. He's like, my brother-in-law wants to play like cable TV in surround sound in the entertainment room and a different source playing music outside. He doesn't want them just playing the same thing. I'm like, okay, well, Yamaha Zone B doesn't work. Okay, let's look at MusicCast, because MusicCast is really cool. MusicCast is this thing that can send wireless audio even from an HDMI source plugged into your AV receiver to other MusicCast speakers. But you can only select one source on the AV receiver at a time. You can't select 2 different sources on the AV receiver at a time. So same thing. Now we've just made it wireless, but you still have to play the same thing in the main zone and
I've got
the MusicCast zone.
Stupid suggestion, I think. I think I have a stupid suggestion, which may actually make the most sense. I can't believe these words are going to come out of my mouth, but I kind of feel like he could buy another receiver and then have them both connected to all of his devices.
Meaning HDMI splitters for every source?
Well,
or at least a matrix switch?
A matrix switch would work.
Yes,
and then split that out into 2 separate receivers. Use one receiver for outside, one receiver for inside. And the outside receiver could be, I mean, it could be literally the most basic thing.
It would still have to have HDMI.
It would have to have HDMI, but that's all it would have to have. Because
right.
it could be an integrated amp even, as long as it has HDMI.
Yeah.
So you could get something really
I did
small.
mention that because, that is the one way. You would have all of your HDMI sources plugged into, say, a 4-in, 2-out HDMI matrix switch.
Yeah.
One of those is feeding the main zone with surround sound. The other one is feeding you can select any of those sources independently to send out of the 2 outputs on a matrix switch. And yeah, that is one solution. But of course, that means buying another receiver and an HDMI matrix switch.
Well, maybe not a receiver, but I mean, you could get something even smaller.
Well, something with HDMI, yeah.
It's got to have just, I mean, there's a lot of really small, like almost like integrated amps, basically.
Yeah.
That
a lot of those stereo ones don't have HDMI inputs.
Yeah, that's true. But I think there's got to be something that does, though.
So I suggested that. That is one workaround. Now I was like, look, there's got to be an AV receiver that lets you actually do zone 2 using an HDMI source. There's got to be. And there are. But they're not cheap.
I was going to say, it's not going to be cheap because it usually is like $1,000 level or $1,200 level.
Well, it's not that bad. $450 is the starting. Now, this is at Accessories for Less.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's at Accessories for Less. I'm talking about retail. It's going to be $1,000, $1,200.
Yeah, exactly. So it is the Denon AVR X3100 is the currently cheapest and available model. The sister model from Marantz is the SR6009. And those are fairly high up in the lineup, but thanks to them being a year old and refurbished from Accessories for Less, it's like $450, $500. Now, those can take any HDMI source, play it in surround sound in your main zone, and they can take a different HDMI source and play it out of the zone 2 speakers. It can do it, but there's a big, big catch, which is that if you send surround sound to the zone 2 outputs, it goes, can't do it. I can only take a 2-channel PCM signal. That's all it can handle. Because it doesn't have 2 decoders. It doesn't have 2 Dolby Digital decoders built in.
Right.
It's got one
so
decoder.
That you would have to physically change
the source
each
to be
time
outputting 2-channel PCM.
Yeah.
So
because you wouldn't want it to have 2-channel PCM all the time, because when you play it in the main zone, you wouldn't have surround sound.
You want surround sound, yeah. So it can kind of be done, but it's a hassle.
I like mine better.
I know.
I bet mine's cheaper too, to be honest with you.
That's right.
I bet mine's cheaper. I bet you could do mine for $250 total.
So I was so then I was like, how about the new Onkyos? Because the new Onkyos in their literature, in their advertising, say we have separate DACs for Zone 2. It says it right in their marketing. we have separate DACs for Zone 2. I'm like, okay, that sounds promising, Onkyo. What you got? Read through the manual. It's like, only works with optical and coax inputs. Does not work with HDMI. Only works with coax and optical. And still has to be 2-channel PCM. Yes, you have a DAC. You can turn digital into analog, but it's not a decoder. It's a DAC. So, okay, no solution there. So we're up to either $450, but you have to make sure that your source is always sending out 2-channel PCM when you want to send it to Zone 2. I'm like, there has to be something better. So there is an inexpensive solution, but it's actually no better than what I just mentioned, because you would still have to make sure it's 2-channel PCM coming out of whatever is feeding Zone 2. And that is over at Monoprice. They're working with the company, Blackbird? That's how everything is labeled anyway, Blackbird. Well, they have a 4-in, 2-out HDMI matrix switch. They're selling it for $60, and it has an analog stereo audio output. So you can take an HDMI source in, and then it will feed analog audio out parallel with the HDMI output. I love this. It's only on it's only on one of the HDMI. It's HDMI 1, right? So HDMI 1 can also send out analog audio. It can also send out digital coax, SPDIF audio. But again, it's not a decoder. So it has to be a 2-channel PCM signal. You can take that, strip that off of the HDMI connection, turn it into its 2-channel analog audio, but it can't take like Dolby Digital 5.1, decode that down, mix it to 2-channel, and put it out. So ultimately, Tom's suggestion of 2 receivers.
I think 2 receivers is the way to go here.
It's the way to go, with a matrix switch, with an HDMI matrix switch. How convoluted and crazy is that? That's why it was way more research than anticipated. But yeah, I'm sorry. If there was a better solution, we would tell you. We would tell you.
But seriously, look at like stuff like I almost want to say stuff like headphone amps or something like that, but yeah, not really headphone amps, but really small integrated, because this is just going to be for outside.
Yeah, so, and you actually only need one HDMI input, because the matrix switch is doing all the switching.
That's right, one HDMI input and
a Dolby Digital decoder. Because you want it has to have a decoder,
and then be able to power 2 speakers, and that's it.
Because it's totally fine to send a Dolby Digital 5.1 signal into a receiver or integrated amp that is only powering 2 speakers, because it will down mix, it will decode the 5.1 and down mix it to 2-channel and play it just fine. Like if you had like a killer AV receiver, but you only connected your front, left, and right speakers, you can still send surround sound to it. It will decode it, down mix it, and play it. But the problem with all of these Zone 2 solutions is that they don't have a separate decoder. They might have a DAC, but they don't have a decoder. So yeah, 2 AV receivers. It ends up, or a second thing with HDMI in. There you go. Sorry, man, but that's the solution.
That's crazy. I'm sitting here thinking maybe he could could he somehow run them all to like an Oppo and have the Oppo do it and then send it out? I'm like, I just don't see any way of doing it. All right.
You'd still need a separate switch.
You'd still need a switch, yeah. Tom, this is Tom K, did something he never expected he'd do. He sold his Emotiva XMC1. I don't know why. Are we shocked? I guess we're shocked.
He was.
Apparently he surprised himself. Someone bought it for $1,750, so thank goodness for Emotiva fans.
Oh yeah.
How much you sell that thing? How much was it brand new? Anyways, doesn't make a difference. That allowed him to buy a refurbished Marantz SR7010 receiver from Accessories for Less and still have extra money left over to put towards his ceiling speakers. Nice. He also thanks us for suggesting a Send Acoustics HTM 200 SEs, which is what he will now use that he can have. So what he will use now that he can have a full 7.2.4 setup. Yeah. As excited as he is, he's feeling a bit anxious because his theater was sounding as good as it ever has already with XMC1 in place, although a lot of it might have had to do with the CR2 speakers and acoustic treatment upgrades.
I believe so.
I would think so. Can we put his mind at ease a little bit? All right, here we go.
Yes.
There's like 20 of these things.
So yeah, that's right.
We'll
knock them out.
The Marantz SR7010 is about as future-proof as it can be on the video side, correct? He doesn't want to be caught unprepared for 4K and HDR.
Yeah, it's as prepared as you can be. Every single HDMI connection on that unit is HDMI 2.0A with HDCP 2.2 with the full 18 gigabits per second of bandwidth. Now, Could there be another future HDMI upgrade if they decide they want dynamic metadata on HDR10 and that somehow requires a hardware upgrade? Okay, yes, but nobody else is any better prepared.
Yes,
so
you're as prepared as you can be right now.
And it can upconvert every single analog video source all the way up to 4K 60. So it's as prepared as you possibly can be right this minute. Yeah.
Question is, can it send out something through Zone 2? That's the real question.
It has a Zone 2 HDMI output, and it can send out 2-channel PCM sources to Zone 2.
Would there have been any advantage in going with the Marantz AV7702 Mark II Pre-Pro instead? It's the same price as the SR7010, but obviously doesn't have any amplifiers built in.
Right.
And it doesn't use any XLR connections as it is, and we always seem to be recommending going with an AV receiver, so he did. I don't think that I can think of any reason why you would want to go with the Pre-Pro unless you have a whole bunch of amps sitting around and you just want to. But even then, it's normally my go-to is to say, go with the receiver. Worst case scenario, you don't use the amps that are in there. But frankly, all you were paying for was XLR, switching out all those amps with XLR connections.
And in the case of the AV7702 Mark II versus the SR7010 in particular, they are identical inside, except the SR7010 has 9 amplifiers and the AV7702 has XLR outputs. Yeah. Everything else about them, they took the SR7010 and said, hey, this would make a really great pre-pro. That's exactly what it is.
Let's drop the amps out of it, put some XLR connections, and those people will pay the same for it.
That's right. And the XLR connections, they are a balanced connection, but the circuitry, all the circuitry inside of it is not balanced. It is a single-ended unit all the way until they got to the XLR connections, and then they just split the signal and inverted one side and sent it out. So you are paying the same price for not getting any amps and getting nothing additional. So you went the correct way. This way you don't have to buy even more. You had 9 channels of amps as it was, or 10. Because I think you had a 7-channel and a 3-channel. He needs 11. Well, you just got 9 more for free.
There you go. Yeah. Is there a better choice for $1,700 that he could have made? He already has Sonos, so whole house audio wasn't a consideration.
Right.
So Yamaha really is the other option that we would have pushed you towards, and one of the reasons would be because of the music cast system. But you already have Sonos, so you're not worried about that. Plus, frankly, I think the Denon and Marantzas right now are superior in many ways to the Yamahas. So I don't think that Sonos, even if you didn't have a Sonos, I would still say that you made a fine choice with this receiver.
Yeah. No, I mean, the sister model in Denon's lineup is the X6200W. On that one, they added the Denon Link connection.
Ooh.
And they took away the 5.1 or the 7.1 analog inputs, which the Marantz actually has. Other than that, I mean, yes, there are some slight differences in the amplifiers because the X6200 is built in Japan. The Marantz uses slightly different preamp stages. They have their HDAM preamp stages that are exclusive to Marantz. Effectively, they're sister models. Yeah. So yeah, no, Music Cast is the killer feature on Yamaha. But yeah, you already said you got a different solution for whole house audio, so you made the right choice, in my opinion.
Next, will it sound just as good as his XMC1 used to? Will Odyssey be just as good as Dirac was? We don't know. Honestly, we have no idea. And he knows that we don't know. And he's just asking it because he wants to ask it. And he's going to tell us.
That's right.
And frankly, he's not going to know either because audio memory is like 3 seconds. So
and if you're really dissatisfied, it is upgradable to Odyssey Pro, which gets you pretty much everything Dirac can do as well. So that would be an additional cost, but you can upgrade to Odyssey Pro with that unit.
I don't think that you're going to be disappointed in any way, shape, or form.
I really don't.
I don't see it happen. I don't see you going, oh, it just sounds so much worse than now that. I don't think that's going to happen.
Nor do I.
I think if you're really very honest with yourself, you're going to go, I think it kind of sounds the same.
That's what he's got Atmos now. He didn't have that before.
That's true.
Hopefully that sounds different.
Other than that. All right. He's going to mount the HTM 200's overhead Atmos speakers above the ceiling above the ceiling,
Uh-huh.
with the plan being to nail two 2x4s above the ceiling holes perpendicular to the joist that will serve as mounting points. Should you worry about the orientation of the speakers relative to the seats, since the sounds will be panned in all directions anyways? Well, you're just supposed to fire the things straight down. So
Yeah.
just do that. Do whatever
Yeah,
that
so I
is.
mean, he's looking at the HTM 200s, which are the nested array design. It's two woofers with the tweeter like offset, like raised above it. So if it was sitting horizontal, you could have the tweeter above sort of the two woofers below it, or you could flip that upside down. So I mean, according to Ascend, that very slightly, like whatever side the tweeter is on, the high frequencies, sort of spread out in that direction a little bit more, a tiny bit, but those nested arrays are very even dispersion by their sort of nature. So effectively, no, if you want to go for it, just always have the tweeter on the audience side. So if you're using this as a front speaker, you had it below your TV, you'd have the tweeter on top. If you had it above the TV, you'd have the tweeter on the bottom. If you had it as your front left speaker, you'd have the tweeter on the inside, right, on the right side. So same thing overhead, just make sure the tweeter is closest to the audience. And after that, I mean, they're wide dispersion. So they're very nice Atmos speakers because they're wide dispersion.
Right.
So that's about it.
You could use a little clarification regarding Bitstream audio. We've mentioned that with Marantz receivers, Dolby Surround Upmixer can only be applied to Dolby Bitstream signals and uncompressed PCM signals. And DTS Neural X Upmixer can only be applied to DTS Bitstream signals and uncompressed PCM signals. With this previous setup, he found that sending his Xbox One to PCM output sounded significantly better than when it was set to Bitstream audio. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense, to be honest with you, for reasons we'll talk about in a second. But with streaming sources like Netflix and HBO Go, they sounded fine either way. Furthermore, he has backed up all of his Blu-ray movies as MKV files. He just wants to be sure he's hearing the best audio quality possible. And then, of course, he wants genuine Atmos from DTS and DTS X from any Blu-ray movies that have those soundtracks. So what should he use, Bitstream or PCM? Well, let's go back to your Xbox One. So you set your Xbox One to PCM output, and it sounded better than it was set to Bitstream. That's because the Xbox One can only Bitstream out Dolby Digital and DTS. It does not send out Bitstreams of Master Audio or Dolby True HD, which is ridiculous.
Well, it can with physical Blu-ray discs, can't it?
Discs, yeah, with discs,
with a physical Blu-ray disc, it can. Yeah.
That's completely different. But you're talking about the movies and stuff, and anything else, you just get normal. You just get normal DTS.
In particular for games. Right?
Yes,
it's starting its life as PCM audio. That is uncompressed, full quality. When you set the Xbox One to output Bitstream audio for your games, it is running it through a real-time lossy Dolby Digital or DTS encoder. That's what it's doing. And those are, as we discussed last week, throwing away some data in order to crunch down the file size. So when we talk
completely
about...
pointless. We've got an HDMI connection to your receiver. There's no reason to do that.
Yeah, when we talk about Bitstream audio versus PCM audio, it's important to know that there are two types of bitstream audio, lossy and lossless, right? If it was lossless bitstream audio, it would ultimately sound identical to the PCM. But if it's lossy bitstream, like original Dolby Digital, original DTS, or if it was MP3 or AAC or something like that in the stereo world, then you are losing some of the quality by using the bitstream. So when it comes to Blu-ray movies, when it comes to actual Atmos or actual DTS X, you must send out the bitstream. You cannot have the player do the decoding because it will only decode it to 7.1 PCM. Right. It will disregard all of the immersive audio metadata, which is what allows you to have those overhead channels. So you must have your Blu-ray player output bitstream audio, and it must be the full fat, not downgraded to regular Dolby Digital or regular DTS version. It must be the full lossless bitstream version coming out of your Blu-ray player. Now, he mentions that he's backed up all his Blu-ray movies to MKV files. Now, MKV files can hold the full lossless Dolby True HD, DTS HD Master Audio, Dolby Atmos, or DTS X file. There's no reason an MKV file can't have that, but you got to be a bit careful because if you were using, let's say, Make MKV, which is probably the most popular program to do this, by default, it doesn't select those audio tracks. By default, it selects the lossy Dolby Digital or DTS core audio. So
Right.
if all you went with was the DTS, or all you went with was the default settings when you were making those MKV files, you got to check. Luckily, on your new AV receiver, it will tell you what signal it is receiving. So if you're like, I know for a fact I'm watching, Ex Machina. This has a DTS X soundtrack on it, but my AV receiver is not lighting up DTS X as the audio format that's coming in, and this is off of the backup I made as an MKV file. It's like, well, maybe it's not in the MKV file.
Right.
So there might be some movies you have to re-rip. That is a possibility. But yeah, you need the full audio track in there as far as your Blu-rays go.
Now, normal Blu-rays, you have the option really of a PCM or Bitstream out, and generally speaking, the way Blu-rays were meant to be done is the all the decoding was supposed to happen in the player.
Right.
It's supposed to happen at the source.
That was the original idea.
The PCM was going to come out, and any receiver could take that PCM and not have to do anything to it. There's no decoding necessary. But then everybody wanted to be able to see it, say, True HD on their receivers and blah, blah, blah. So therefore, here we are with this. Now that we have this new Ultra HD with the metadata, the decoders are not in the players. The decoders are in the, or maybe they have decoders in the players, but in order to get the full Atmos or the heights stuff, you need to have that decoding done at the receiver.
Yep.
So for right now, I guess leave your Xbox alone, but for your Ultra HD Blu-ray, or your Blu-ray player, make sure that it's
but I just wanted to clarify, it's not as simple as Bitstream is always superior to PCM or so. It's not that simple. It's like there is lossless Bitstream and loss-E Bitstream. So, and
I don't care what anybody says, unless something's going wrong, there is no reason why the decoding being done at the receiver is any different than the decoding being done at the player. It should sound exactly identical. There should be no difference unless there's some sort of volume difference based on that. That's the only thing I will accept, because the decoders are the same.
There is that dialogue normalization signal in Dolby, so that can sometimes do it.
All right, Jonathan had a couple of comments. First, he loves his Nest thermostat. He uses one in his cottage where his small room home theater is. Excuse me, and it allows him to view, set, and track the temperature and how much heating, cooling he's using remotely. Plus, it automatically sends an alert via text message to both him and a superintendent who can look in on the place when Jonathan isn't there if anything goes wrong. That said, if Nest servers ever shut down, he obviously will not be happy. So, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, Mike could do that too. I could set that up, but whatever. Yeah. Second, he thinks that for anyone with an actual media room rather than a multi-purpose living room or other type of situation, adding Atmos might be thought of more of a why not rather than why. In home theater buffs' minds, it's a one-time effort to run the speaker wire up to the ceiling positions, and good, inexpensive speakers are easy to find these days. To him, that explains why it has been more popular than we might have expected. I still don't think it's popular. Honestly, I don't. I will have to see some data that some real actual data that tells me how many houses have Atmos speakers. I don't even care if it's just height speakers. I would like to see anything.
We do have to say, as far as like the forum folks go, and certainly people writing into this podcast, it actually is more popular than we really expected right at the get-go. Because like people have not just rejected it outright, which was a possibility. People might have said, forget it, I'm sticking with 7.1. That's already more than I use 5.1. That was a possibility. It's like, no, it has been, more people have been bullish on it than that. So that's fair enough.
And I'm still contemplating putting height speakers up at some point. I don't know that I'll ever put up. Yeah, I don't really see how I'm going to get a top. I could get a voice of God up there.
Yeah.
But I mean, the ceiling is it's too shallow for
everything. Tom's the one who ends up with Oro.
I know, right? All right. Now, he is still a little unclear on how full array local dimming actually works mathematically and why it wouldn't allow for a higher dynamic range image all on its own, even without an HDR signal. Can we explain things a bit further?
I sure can.
I know that you can.
So the first part to think of is just the LCD itself, because full array local dimming only exists in LCD displays. So we can actually go to something like a plasma or an OLED first. When in those, each individual pixel of that display is emitting its own light. And if it's, a 10-bit OLED panel, it means that every single individual little pixel, in fact, every little sub-pixel, because there's a red, green, and blue sub-pixel to each pixel, every single one of those can go from fully off up to as bright as it possibly can. And if it's a 10-bit panel, it has 1,024 steps to do that. So in between fully off and as bright as it can possibly be, there's 1,024 different steps from there to there. So that's in an OLED or in a plasma display. Now, an LCD is essentially a shutter. Each individual pixel, or in fact, each individual sub-pixel, there's one for red, green, and blue. Each one acts as a little shutter, and it can close down as much as it can, or it can open up as much as it can. And if it's a 10-bit LCD panel, it has 1,024 steps in between as closed as it can be and as open as it can be. But with an LCD panel, because it's working like a shutter, even when it's as closed as it possibly can be, it doesn't block all the light. A little bit of light still leaks through, which is why LCD panels always have worse black levels than OLED or plasma displays. So if the problem is that a little bit of light always leaks through, what if we could vary the backlight? Right? So we start with a global variable backlight, one where the entire backlight behind the entire LCD panel can dim or brighten. Right? It's not just stuck at one on or off position. So if we do that, okay, if the entire screen needs to be darker, if the whole thing is going to a full black screen or a full white screen, we could dim or brighten the entire backlight, and then in combination with the LCD shutters, get a really deep black or a really bright white. But what we wouldn't be able to do is have a really dark black and a really bright white at the same time, because the entire backlight is either dimming or brightening. So we go one step better than that. We go to edge lighting with some amount of what they call local dimming, but really it's just like kind of strips of light or things being sent through little tubes. So maybe you have a few different areas, so you can make one area of the screen a little bit brighter and a separate area of the screen at the same time a little bit darker. And that lets you go, okay, the top left corner is really bright, but the bottom right corner is really dark. And we can make the backlight behind that bottom right corner darker, and we can make the backlight behind that upper left corner brighter. And then we combine that with the LCD shutter, and we can get, darker black in one corner and brighter white in the other corner at the same time. That's better contrast for that scene. But ultimately, we have as much as the LCD can close down, as much as it can open up, now combined with as much as you can dim the backlight and as much as you can brighten the backlight. So then we go to full array local dimming, which is just several zones of light. It's certainly not down to the per pixel level. It's maybe 64 separate zones or 128 separate zones, or sometimes it's only like 16 or something, or like
5. That
or
one that
5,
had 5.
yeah.
That was the weirdest thing.
But the idea is that in these little zones, in these little sections of the screen, the backlight back there can brighten or dim, responding to whatever is in the video signal. And then on top of that, the LCD shutter is still closing or opening to whatever degree. And if it's a 10-bit panel, it's got 1,024 steps. So the math of it is how many steps of light, how many zones. That tells us the total size area, and a lot of these have like 24 steps of light, so it would be 24 steps of light multiplied by the 1,024 steps of the LCD. That's all the variation you can possibly have from the darkest dark to the brightest bright. But you can never get down to the per pixel level unless we literally had full array local dimming, which was an individual backlight for every individual pixel, at which point, why not just make yourself an OLED, right?
It'd probably be cheaper.
It would definitely be cheaper. So why can't that create high dynamic range all by itself without a high dynamic range signal? Well, because if it's a standard dynamic range signal, the brightest that signal is ever telling any area of the image to be is 100 nits. That's where standard dynamic range tops out. So what you could have is a blacker black than what the LCD panel could do all by itself without a variable backlight behind it. You can have better contrast on the screen at the same time. There's a blacker black at the very same time as brighter white somewhere else on the screen. That is the intra-scene contrast I was talking about. Within the scene itself, you can have a blacker black and a brighter white at the same time. But the brightest white still tops out at 100 nits, no matter what, with a standard dynamic range signal. That's all that the full array local dimming got you by itself, was blacker black and whiter white at the same time, but it didn't make the brighter white any brighter than 100 nits. The high dynamic range signal comes along and it says, oh, now whites can get all the way up to, well, theoretically 10,000 nits if you can do it. So it's a substantially different signal, and that's what's going on there.
So if high dynamic range metadata alters the peak brightness on the scene by scene or even frame by frame basis, isn't that betraying the cinematographer's intentions? Shouldn't the brightest image in the movie always be the brightest no matter what? In which case, could static HDR metadata actually be superior? I don't think that maybe I'm not understanding how this is supposed to work. This dynamic HDR metadata is supposed to work. But for me, it feels like the scene itself is analyzed and the brightest part of that scene is then identified and the darkest part is identified and up front. And but it's not changing the brightness based on anything else. Am I misunderstanding the way that this dynamic metadata works?
I think the easiest way to understand it is, let's say you shot a movie and you used the entire capability of the signal. At some point, you have something that is 10,000 nits bright, all right? And let's say you had a display that could actually do that. It could actually show you 10,000 nits if that's what the signal calls for.
It feels like it would be very bright to me.
Right? Yeah, that would be blinding. But if it's only like 1 pixel out of all 8 million, then who knows, right? But let's say that was the case. Well, if that's the case, then there would be no difference, no visible difference at all at any time between a dynamic metadata system and a static metadata system. Because no matter what light output is being called for at any point in the movie, this display that is capable of getting all the way up to 10,000 nits can do it. If the signal says, give me 8,000 nits, it goes, all right, there you go. If the signal says, give me 400 nits, it goes, all right, there you go. And it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter whether it's dynamic or static metadata. In that sense, that is the truest representation of the cinematographer's intention. Whatever was on that signal is exactly what's being shown to you. But of course, there's the huge caveat, which is our displays can't do 10,000 nits, not today. A lot of them can't even do 1,000 nits, right? There's all the OLEDs that top out at 540 nits. There's the Vizio P series that tops out at about 600 nits, right? So it's not getting up to 1,000 nits even. And there's plenty of content that's being mastered where at some point the signal goes all the way up to 4,000 nits. That's what Dolby Vision is mastered at. And there's plenty of content in HDR10 that is mastered at the brightest thing ever in this movie is 1,000 nits, right?
Right.
But let's just use the 1,000 nit example. There's tons of content in HDR10 where the brightest thing in this movie ever is 1,000 nits. But my display can't do 1,000 nits. It can do 540 nits or 600 nits, right? So that's the problem. That's where you need this tone mapping. So what the metadata is saying is let's start with the static metadata. So it's a one-time signal at the start of the movie, and it says the brightest thing in this movie ever is 1,000 nits. And my display that can only go up to 600 says, well, I'm going to tone map that down so that now 1,000 nits equals 600 nits, because that's all I can do, right? And then at some point in the movie, there's something that in the signal says you should be 800 nits now, right? Well, the display goes, well, I can't do 800 nits either, but 800 nits is dimmer than 1,000 nits. So I have to tone map that down. So now 1,000 nits now equals 600 nits, and maybe 800 nits equals 500 nits or something like that, right? The math might be different, but you get the point.
Right.
So that's what it's doing with the static metadata. It's saying whatever the brightest was, that now equals the brightest I can do as the display, and then everything else has to fit below that, right? So even though 800 nits is dimmer than 1,000 nits, and I can go up to 600 nits, I can't show you 800 nits at 600 nits. I have to show it to you at 500 nits because it should be dimmer than the brightest thing in this movie. Well, dynamic metadata says hey, look, do whatever you can do, right? The brightest thing in this scene is 1,000 nits. All right, now I'll make that 600 nits, and everything dimmer than that, and the signal will be below that. But a different scene comes along, and it says, well, the brightest thing in this scene is 600 nits. Now with dynamic metadata, the display can go, oh, I can do that accurately. I don't have to change anything. I can show you the 600 nit thing at 600 nits, and then I can show you the 500 nit thing at 500 nits. I don't have to tone map the whole thing down. So with the dynamic metadata, if the TV can do it for that particular scene, it changes nothing. If it's capable of showing what's in the signal, it just shows it accurately. It's only when the signal exceeds the display's capabilities that it shifts everything down. Whereas with the static metadata, it shifts everything down automatically. So when the signal comes along that says, show me something at 500 nits, it goes, I better show this to you at 250 because I can only max out at 600.
Right. I actually wonder if the dynamic. I think I agree with Jonathan on this one. To be honest with you.
Well, that's his next question that explains why the dynamic is considered superior.
So he says using high dynamic range metadata to squeeze the full video signal into the capabilities of the display, is that at all akin to dynamic range compression in audio? We always seem to avoid dynamic range compression when it comes to sound on this podcast. So why would we be in favor of it when it comes to video? Well, I don't know that I necessarily agree with this, because what he's saying is that HDR is squeezing is compressing it, but really the compression is more going on, to my mind, in the static metadata, because the entire video is being changed based on the capabilities of the TV, which is fine the whole time. Whereas it's not being changed with the dynamic metadata. At least it's only being changed when it has to be, and not the other times. But I think if you're thinking about this idea of what was the cinematographer's their intention or what their design was that throughout the entirety of this movie, that this brightest thing would be the brightest thing in the entire movie, not that it would be the brightest thing in that scene or that frame, and everything else would be scaled. And then you get to this next scene or frame, and it can do everything that's supposed to be. And now the brightest thing in that scene is also the brightest thing that was in this previous scene, which was supposed to be much brighter than everything else.
Yeah, that's the exact argument that that Jonathan is making, and there's a point there. There's definitely a point there. But there's the other side of it, which is that, let's say your display tops out at 600 nits, and a scene comes along, and you've got dynamic metadata, and it says the brightest thing in this scene is 600 nits, and it goes, okay, I change nothing. I show it to you exactly as it is. Whereas if it was static metadata, and one time in the movie, it goes up to 1,000 nits, but most of the time it never goes above 600, right? So there's one little scene that goes up to 1,000, but the whole rest of the movie, there's a ton of scenes that go up to 600. Well, if it's static metadata, the whole thing got shifted down once at the beginning, and now every time those 600 nit peaks come up, you're only getting 250 or 300 or something like that.
Right.
You are never seeing it accurately. That's the argument on the other side. Right. It's that when everything gets shifted, you're never seeing it accurately. So you're, in a sense, being robbed of some detail that you could be seeing for the vast majority of the movie, all because one time it exceeds the capability of your display. So the argument is, look, let's try and show as much detail the majority of the time as we can. If we get a signal that exceeds the capability of the display, we have a choice. We can either clip it off and just show it as max white, or we can tone map everything down and in that scene retain as much detail as we can. It's not as much as the signal asked for, but we will retain as much as we can. So we will always maximize the detail possible, even though it means shifting.
I can see the argument on both sides of this, to be honest with you. I would like to have the option on my display of turning this on or off, because I have a feeling my sense is going to be that I personally am going to prefer static metadata to I believe that. I believe that because I think that the totality of the movie is being all relative to each other is more important to me than having pieces of it be perfectly accurate or perfectly bright as it's supposed to be, and other parts of it brought down to that same brightness level.
Right.
I have a feeling I'm going to prefer the overall.
But it's that question of, do you want to, for the vast majority of the movie, be giving up detail that you don't have to?
I
because that's
understand.
what static metadata does. Yeah.
I'd be interested. I bet there's.
It is, yeah.
I'd be interested to see how this shakes out. So good question,
Yeah.
Jonathan. And now that finishes up last week's question. So we're going to start these week's questions again with Jonathan.
Yeah. He continues on.
So, in response to our thoughts on his surround backs, last week we were deciding what kind of surround backs he should get. Anyways, there's about 5 feet behind the seats, which seems to him to be enough distance. Well,
it is
enough distance.
It is.
So, although the one reason he wanted to avoid using the ELACs for this is because they are rear ported, he wouldn't want to waste any distance on giving them the required space from the wall.
They need all of like an inch and a half. Honestly,
whatever, that's fine. All right,
yeah,
when he said small. He was thinking really small, though. He wasn't thinking like, he was thinking really small, like Orb Audio small.
Right.
Now, if you've ever seen Orb Audio, they are about like this.
They're a little orb.
They are an orb. And they have different sizes of them.
Whatever the diameter of the driver, you just make a sphere out of that.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
So, So he appreciates the NHT Super Zero's idea, but even they would require rearranging his acoustic panels, while the orbs could be just mounted above them or even just sat on top of them. I don't see why you can't do that with the other ones. I don't think you should set the orbs on top of things, so they will roll
that
off.
seems a little precarious. Use the mounts. They include mounts if you get them. Yeah.
He's only concerned with having to cross them over at 150, but should he be concerned? What do we think of the orbs for this use? I think they're fine for this use. My very first review, speaker review, I believe, was Orb Audio.
There you go.
And I did like them. They were a nice little speaker, and I think these are perfectly functional for Atmos type things.
Oh, sure.
And rear.
And surround backs? Sure.
Oh, yeah.
I agree. I will simply mention I have an alternative that is very similar, which is available from Accessories for Less, which are the Focal Little Birds. We've actually mentioned the Birds before. That was one that a different listener was actually asking about, but they have one called the Little Bird, which is a 4-inch woofer with a little 3/4-inch tweeter, and they're quite similar in form to the Orb Audio ones. Come with integrated little wall mount there that you can move it and then swivel the thing in any direction. So nice and small, $100 each. And they would certainly get the job done too. I like Focal myself, so it's just an alternative though. That's all. It's not effectively that much different.
Right. He'd like to thank Rob for pointing out that 7.1 is Atmos. What he's trying to do is have it sort of both ways by mounting surround backs higher than normal, which would make them sort of surround back, sort of top rears. Of course, his Denon X2200 doesn't support top rears, but he's assuming the Dolby Surround Up Mixer takes that top rear audio and puts it into the surround backs by default anyway. Is that correct?
Well, anything that was in within the signal says this should be above and behind you.
Yeah.
Then the renderer will probably just put that into your surround backs. Stuff that was supposed to be directly above you or in front of you and above you, it's just going to pretty much play those out of either the fronts or the surrounds, because that's the best it can do. It cares more about the two-dimensional plane more than the elevation plane. But yeah, stuff that was supposed to be above and slightly behind you, it'll probably throw those in the surround backs. So yeah. But the main thing is that you have object-based audio. Stuff can be steered around. That's all.
Right. So Bill the Stumper, what was his thing? He had hums or something, right? Or why would we call him the Stumper?
Gosh, I'm drawing a blank now. Isn't that awful?
Isn't he the guy whose his Roku or whatever was making his
yes,
flutter or whatever?
I think that was right.
Anyways, Bill the Stumper thanks us for recommending the Shure SE215s. He just got them. Is impressed by their comfortable fit and great sound for $98. Sorry.
Yeah.
He would recommend them to anyone. Now he's got a question for a friend.
Yes.
His friend has a 2-channel system in a great room/family room open to the kitchen, etc. He currently has Tecton Lore 2.0 towers and is looking to upgrade. He'd like to stay with towers for volume and bass extension and wants to avoid a subwoofer due to placement difficulties, although Bill is working on convincing him otherwise.
Bill listens to this podcast.
He also
His friend does not.
Mostly to vocal, jazz, rock, electronic, and prog rock. Prog rock. I don't know what progressive rock is, to be honest with you. What kind of band would progressive rock be? Do you know? Okay.
I don't know.
I know what vocal, jazz, rock, and electronic are, but progressive rock.
But I mean, honestly, that's a pretty wide range.
Yeah, he just basically listens to he listens to much stuff.
And some stuff wants to get loud. So.
Yes. Anyways, he's interested in Sierra Towers, having heard Bill's Sierra 2s, and also in Song Towers, either the supercharged or Veracity STs or the new Song 3s, but has no
All
way
of which are ribbon tweeter models, so there seems to be a theme there.
Yes. He has no way of hearing these, unfortunately, before buying them, and Salk has the return policy of sucks to be you.
Yeah, they essentially consider whatever they make custom. So
yes,
yeah.
they don't take them back. So does he have any advice? Any others to consider? He's willing to spend up to $5K or so on the pair.
Woo! Man, there's a lot of choices with $5K to spend.
$5K, holy crap, dude!
There
Literally
are so
all
many
of them.
speaker choices, including
being...
allocating a good portion of those funds to a pair of subwoofers.
Yes, let's talk about that. But he's not. It's not really good. All right. Sierras are going to be more power hungry than aren't those Tictons like super duper efficient, right?
I mean they're not in they're like 96 dB efficient. They're very efficient. They're clip efficient.
So you're in a very big room. I'm going to be honest with you. Salks in the past have not had the best luck in very big rooms. Now they may have changed the design since then, but Gene melted them down pretty hard.
That was with their dome tweeter, though. It was a different speaker. These are in fact in these Salk models that he's looking at. They are RAL ribbon tweeters, the same tweeters that are used in the Ascend Sierra series.
All right.
So they got lots of power handling, those ones.
Yeah, I don't think I would be worried too much about it. But if you're looking at the same tweeter in a bunch of different speakers, and Salk is gonna tell you to suck it if you order them, and at least with the Sierras, you can send them back. Kind of leaning in that direction. But that being said, for $5,000, dude, you should be listening to just about everything on the planet. Let's be honest. It is very hard to find a speaker manufacturer that makes a speaker for more than $5,000 a pair that doesn't have a $5,000 a pair lying around someplace that they'd very much like to sell you. So go to your local hi-fi stores and listen. For loud and for bass, the towers are fine. I do really I wonder if you might like those def decks though.
Well, there's that. Well, the other one that I was going to point him to was Golden Ear.
Yeah.
Because Golden Ear has plenty of their Triton models that have powered subwoofers built in. He could actually afford the flagship Triton ones. They are $5,000 a pair. Those have like 2 powered and 4 passive radiator things built into each tower. Right? They have actual, I mean, they're not lying when they say they can extend all the way down to like 15 hertz. They can. They actually do have output like way down low. So in terms of what they themselves are putting out into the room, they can certainly output bass. The problem is, of course, as we always talk about on this podcast, placement. You are stuck putting those 2 speakers where your front, left, and right speakers should be, which is probably not the best place for where the bass ought to be coming from, right? Yeah. But I mean, he could afford a nice pair of subwoofers and the Ascend Sierra Towers, because the Ascend Sierra Towers are $2,700.
He could also order some my speakers. Too.
Yeah, the Aperion Verus Grands.
Verus Grands too.
Those are even less expensive, right?
Even less expensive. And they have a return policy that is like...
Oh, they sure do.
So that would be something I would do as well. I would order those.
So, I mean, it really comes down to, of course, Bill knows. It's not like Bill is the one who's resisting subwoofers here. He's trying to get his friend on board. So if he is on board, I would vote for getting... I love the Ascend. I have Sierra Horizons with RALs, but effectively sound the same as the towers. They can play exceedingly loud, so I'm not concerned about that. But they don't extend down to below 20 hertz, nor would I want them to, because I want my bass coming from a pair of subwoofers. So that's definitely an option. If you go with the Salk ones, they aren't effectively that much different. For one thing, Ascend actually charges a lower markup. That's part of why their price is the way that it is. But they also have their model that they make, and they make a bunch of them to get a price break on mass producing them, whereas the Salks are largely considered custom made. They make them kind of one at a time. So you're getting very similar performance at a lower price from Ascend in that regard out of those models that you mentioned.
Plus the bamboo. They make those in the bamboo,
cabinets,
right?
Yeah.
Just looks fantastic.
And the Salks are empty. Well, the Salks, allow you to choose a bamboo cabinet for a significant price increase
Right.
if you really want to. So yeah, the Ascends are to me the better value if that's the one you're going for. I agree. Tom's Aperion Verus Grand option is there, and then the DefTechs are something you can go to a store and listen to those.
That's
at
what I'm
least.
saying. You need to go to the store, take them to the store, and listen to like DefTechs
And
Golden
Ears,
Ear. Of course, that's the same people that made
It is,
DefTechs.
yeah.
Obviously not anymore, but they did. So it's going to have a similar sort of thing. And they're going to, the thing I think that he might appreciate about DefTechs and the Golden Ears is they're kind of built for these really big rooms. You know, they have their powered subwoofers and their bipoles. So they got sound going out all over the place, bouncing all over the place. So very well might like those speakers quite a bit.
It's very possible. And there's absolutely nothing wrong if he's like, these float my boat and I love these Golden Ear Triton ones or something like that. I'm like, I believe you because they're good sounding speakers. So they might fit the bill and you should be able to find a dealer for them. I'll mention Legacy Audio because that's another one that uses those folded ribbon tweeters. Now, they tend to be kind of pricey, so you'd be looking at like the classic HD model would be the one that fits, under $5,000 a pair. And Legacy doesn't have as many dealers. So it might be a little bit of a challenge. I'm not sure exactly where in the country you're located. So it might be a little bit more of a challenge. But we'll have the links to these on our website, avrant.com, to these suggestions. And you can use their dealer locator to see if they're around. But yeah, I think those are worth checking out. But I mean, you might go to a dealer and say like, hey, these Paradigm Studios are the ones that I like best, which would be a totally fine choice. Or these PSBs or these B&Ws or these Revel or whatever. There's lots of choices when you got $5,000 to spend. So listen to everything you can, but if you really liked those ribbon tweeters, then those are some suggestions, specific ones that we've given.
Yeah, I have a feeling that he's going to find when he goes to a store and listens to a bunch of different speakers that he does like those ribbon tweeters, and those are great tweeters. But most people, once they get out there and start listening, it suddenly all sort of meshes into one, and they are they're not as able to pick out what they really like because they don't spend as much time doing it as you or I would do.
Sure, and when you're in that type of price range, it's like they almost all do sound very, very good.
Yeah, they're all sounding very good
because they're not being hamstrung by budgetary constraints.
That's anymore. Right. So getting him, I mean, especially if he's worried about bass and stuff, and even though we're going to eventually tell him to turn, to cross the speakers over into the subwoofers when he gets them, at least for the time being, he'll have powered subs there.
Yeah.
That's
I'll bet you he'd be impressed by the Golden Ears. I suspect they would put a smile on his face. Yeah.
All right. Justin, not Bieber.
Actually, he did have a question about the RAL tweeters.
You already answered that though.
Well, it's just the specific models of ribbon tweeters that are in there. RAL effectively has 3 models that they OEM to whoever is putting their tweeters into their speakers. So they basically have the 70-20, and that's listing the height versus the width. So it's 70 millimeters high and 20 millimeters wide. And they have the 70-10, which is, of course, 70 millimeters high and 10 millimeters wide. And then they have a big one, which is the 140-15. So it's 140 millimeters tall and 15 millimeters wide. They will change out the faceplate to fit whatever you want. So really, you're looking at the 70-20 or the 70-10 in either Ascend or Sulk's case. Sulk tends to use the one with the square faceplate, and Ascend tends to use the one with the round faceplate. But that's basically the only difference. So if it looks a bit bigger and wider, it's the 70-20. If it's skinny and taller, then it's the 70-10.
All right.
Different faceplates.
Once again, Justin Not Bieber asked a few weeks ago about Odyssey sending his subs to -12 dB, and he has some further details. Yes. And we told him to turn his subs down and run it again.
And move the mic.
Advice. And move his mic, that's right. He took our advice and put the measurement mic in different positions on a tripod, tried moving the subs further away from the wall, and even setting the volume knob on the subs to 1.
Yes.
That is about as low as it goes. If I'm understanding how the volume knob nomenclature works, 1 is just above off.
Turned them down. That's for sure.
Anyways, it came out to -12 every single time.
Yeah.
We are having an issue here with the microphone.
Yes.
Yes, he plans on buying a mic from Cross Spectrum Labs to do some manual calibrating, but using the built-in mic and SPL app on his iPhone, he measures 50 dB post Odyssey.
Yeah.
That would be very low.
Yeah.
His iPhone mic probably isn't super accurate, but can it be 25 dB off? I don't think so.
I think you've got an indicator that something has gone wrong here.
Yes, you need to, are you sure? First of all, this mic is not working or is not working correctly.
Yeah, I suspect the microphone, because I mean these are
Yeah.
mass-produced, inexpensive mics that they pack in with the receiver. It is entirely possible that you just have a defective microphone.
Yeah.
It might have been fine when it first came out of the box and it just, got thrown at one point or something. I mean, we've all done it. So it might not, it could totally just be a defective mic. Get in touch with either your AV receiver manufacturer or Odyssey themselves. Odyssey's darn good about responding to.
Yeah, I would.
customer inquiries.
'Cause to me, that's what's going on here. Your mic is jacked.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all jacked up,
And
it's
totally conceivable.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if that mic cost Odyssey a quarter.
25 cents. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I would be shocked if it cost them a quarter.
That's
I
crazy.
think that mic they're probably paying a couple of pennies per. So
they're
they're
getting stacks
the
of them, so-
postage to get one to you is going to be hundreds of times the cost of the actual mic. They'll be happy to send one to you.
I
I'm
hope so.
fairly sure.
They
Yes.
really should. Yeah.
Give them
I'm
a
pretty
call.
sure you've got a defective mic.
Anyways, he says he has wood floors which have rugs, but they don't cover the entire floor. Could the reflections of the floor be caused on Odyssey to measure incorrectly? Is there
Not this
something wrong
much.
with the receiver itself? No, none of these things can. Not this badly.
Nah.
This is clearly a faulty piece of memory. The other thing I would say is this is the sort of mismeasurements that you see when you accidentally plug the wrong mic in.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So if you had two Odyssey mics for some reason, like from an older receiver to this one,
Good point.
could very well be that that's happened. Like, for example, if you're like me, and I don't know why you would be, you would have multiple probe thermometers in your house.
Uh-huh.
When you're cooking and you take your probe, you plug it in and you put it in your food and you set it, and then you stick it into the piece of meat and you put the meat in the oven and then you start it going. I have many of those. Now, what I do not have is a family capable of keeping them together. So what I have is a stack of probes, and a stack of the thermometer things. And when I plug them in, God knows how. Because if you plug the wrong one in, it doesn't work. So you'll get wildly different things, and I have to start flipping them around. The way that I do is I have to go back through and I get a cup of hot water and I measure it with another thermometer, and then have to plug them all in and then figure it out that way.
But yeah, get a replacement mic either from the manufacturer or from Odyssey, because if it's this inaccurate in the base, it's probably inaccurate everywhere else too. You don't want it equalizing your speakers based on horribly inaccurate measurements. That's no way to live. So yeah, get a replacement mic. I'm almost certain that's the problem here, because it's by far the most likely culprit.
Yeah. So anyways, he's confused on a different topic here.
Yeah.
He's confused about DTS Headphone X. He was looking for devices that offer it, and all he found was the Turtle Beach gaming headphones. Is it content encoded rather than devices that matter? Can we explain how it's supposed to work? Well, okay. Let me just say, I went to the DTS Headphone X website, and that is just a land. It is so much information there. It's just ridiculous. I can't believe you can't figure this out for yourself. It is literally nothing. There are pictures. There are things that look like you should be able to click on them. You click on them. Nothing happens.
Oh, hey, they listed 2 whole products that have the processing built into them.
So my understanding is it takes the information and does the encoding, decoding stuff itself. Like your headphones do it. And I don't know if do they only take 2 channels, or they take multi-channel and whatever, but it's supposed to make...
It takes 2 channel.
So it's basically like having Dolby Digital or DTS on your receiver. Get a 2-channel signal in, and then it makes it sound. It's supposed to do something to make it sound like your headphones are giving you surround sound.
Well, it is very akin to the surround sound processing in an AV receiver, in that there are actually multiple facets to it. So one of them is you could have a device that says this has DTS Headphone X processing in it. And there's like, what is it, like an Acer cell phone? I know there's some Chinese cell phones that aren't listed on the DTS
Yeah, there's like
website.
a couple of phones that can do it, and then there's the Turtle Beach
phones, and then there's the Turtle Beach, and I think there's like one Logitech headset that has it too.
Yeah, I don't know if they sell that anymore.
And what those are doing is just taking any 2-channel signal and then applying some processing to it, very much akin to like Dolby Pro Logic 2 processing does in your AV receiver to upmix a 2-channel signal to 5.1. Or like the Dolby Surround Upmixer or DTS Neural X Upmixer now can take other signals that aren't immersive audio and process them and upmix them to include overhead sounds, right? So that's one version of Headphone X, which is there's some kind of processor built into your device. It takes regular 2-channel audio and upmixes it using its processing to give you a sense of the sounds coming from outside of your head and in up to 11, virtual speaker locations. But there is another version of it, which is there can be DTS Headphone X processing applied to the recording itself. And most of these are available as apps, separate apps that you download either from the iOS for iOS or for Android, where like some bands have released albums or movies have released soundtracks with a DTS Headphone X version, which you download as an app. So it's not even like it comes as regular music. It comes as its own separate app. And that has the DTS Headphone X processing already applied to the signal, so you don't need a processor in the device that's playing it back. You plug in any pair of headphones to any playback device, and all the processing is in the signal itself already. So there's that. And then there's been a couple of Blu-rays that have a DTS Headphone X version of the soundtrack on the Blu-ray. So if you're listening to it through headphones, you do that, and it's got this processing already applied. That
seems pointless. But,
and then there's the third and final one, which is you can have a piece of content that has DTS Headphone X data in it and requires a DTS Headphone X decoder to like that. There is that, but they haven't used that version on anything to my awareness. So what they're doing is either applying the processing beforehand so that it doesn't matter what headphones or device you're listening to it on, they will all produce the effect as it's in the recording itself, or they have ones that basically act like an upmixer in the device itself to take any 2-channel recording and futz with it to make it sound more spacious. And the better version of this is the out-of-your-head software.
Right.
Which can take any 2-channel source and use Darren Fong's processing, which is essentially the Smith Realizer processing,
right?
And apply that
that's
processing
only on
to
computer.
it. It's only on your computer. That's right.
Computer. So if you're looking for a standalone headset, there's literally the one, maybe two that are out there, if that's what you're looking for. But frankly, I don't know that this is really going to have much longevity. I don't see this sticking around for a super long time. We're going to see little pieces of it here and there, but they clearly could give two craps about it. If you look at this website, they literally are like,
it has not taken off the way they might have hoped for back in 2012 when they introduced it.
This is not priority one for these guys. So I don't know that I would go out of my way to have it, but whatever. Yeah. So anyways, he's building some DIY acoustic panels, yay. But he doesn't want to build bass traps. Okay. So can we recommend somewhere to buy decent bass traps at a reasonable price?
Sure can.
Well, that's GIK. It's pretty much one of the only one. That's the one that comes to mind, and they've been the go-to forever. In fact, you can buy your raw panels, your raw materials from there if you can't find them locally. Now, usually you can find an Owens Corning place nearby that will sell you a box, and it comes in a box. It's funny, it comes in a very similar size box as the ones that they'll send you when you buy them from GIK. Weird. So they come in there, and then you take them out, and then you can build your panels with them. But 703, 705 is what you want. You can get that from GIK or wherever else, and then they do build their corner traps, which I think are okay, though I feel like they could have a lot more stuff in them. Though
they intentionally have an air gap.
I know they do.
Just more efficient that way. So that's GIK Acoustics is that place. And they have a plethora of acoustic panel,
oodles of options.
That got diffusion, and then they have the combination ones, which is like you can have a bass trap that actually in addition to the insulation style bass trap, also has a membrane on the front of it that they can tune to a specific frequency. So if you have like one specific really problem room mode frequency in your room, you can get a membrane that is specifically tuned to that to cut down just on that one frequency. Or they can put diffusion in front of the bass trap and build that all in so that you have a combination of bass trapping and diffusion all in one panel. So GIK Acoustics, really comprehensive. However, there's a good alternative called Acoustimac. We'll have the links all for these at avrant.com. And what I like is they have some bass trap panels that are meant to go in a corner where they've just like cut off the angle edges of a rectangular trap so that it fits nicely into a corner. Rather than getting the triangular trap, it's just a regular rectangular trap, but then it's got a beveled edge on either side, so it fits at a 45-degree angle into your corner that way. So Acoustimac is a good alternative if you want inexpensive bass traps.
I'm not envisioning what you just described. I'm going to click on the link so I can see
Well,
it.
yeah,
So
think about
maybe-
like a triangle with the tip cut off, or just a rectangular panel that's beveled on both sides, so that instead of trying to fit a rectangle at a 45-degree angle into a corner, now you have beveled edges so that it sits flush. Yeah,
Nope.
it's like putting up crown molding. You got to cut the bevels.
Oh, I see what you're saying now.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying now. Yes,
Yeah.
I see it now. All right. So once you said crown molding, I get it. All right. Yeah, they look all right. I've never been to that website before. Emotiva is famous for not being timely with their new product releases, but we heard anything about the release day for the Air Motive speakers they announced? Hey,
The
let me tell you
versions, yeah.
Yeah, let me just tell you something about Emotiva. I love Emotiva. I do. But they're like that friend who tells you that they're going to be someplace and has never ever shown up on time. Even if I had heard something, I would not believe it until I actually saw that it shipped. I would not believe it.
What is going on, though? I mean, where are those? Where's the Immersa line? Why do they announce even more? They announced that Base X line. I'm like, get out the stuff you already announced first.
Yeah,
Jeez.
just do what I do. Stop listening to their announcements because sometimes they come. Hey, we at the Audioholics event years and years ago, they had the subwoofer that they were coming out with. We were all very excited about it. And like DSP processing and all this other stuff. It looked fantastic. Never really happened. I mean, it kind of sort of came out and then didn't, and then they said it was
changed, morphed into the ones that did eventually come out.
And it was just none of the it was so different by the time it came out.
Speakers are not like super complicated. What's going on? We don't know. Sorry. We haven't heard.
All right. So, is the tweeter the only difference between the Ascend to Sierra 1s and Sierra 2s? And if so, could you buy a pair of Sierra 1s and then at a later time buy the tweeter upgrade and turn them into Sierra 2s? The answer to that question is no and yes, I believe.
No and yes, that's right. Yeah. The only thing that is the same between the Sierra 1 and the Sierra 2 is the cabinet. The cabinet is the same.
And the woofer, huh?
Nope. The Sierra 2 has a different woofer, a different tweeter, and a different crossover than the Sierra 1.
Let's just get, before we go, when you change the tweeter, I don't care. I mean, unless you're doing a drop-in replacement for a damaged one, almost always you have to change the crossover. You have to. It's just part of how these things work. I did not realize I had a different woofer as well. I was trying to figure out what that, because if you go to the Sierra 2 page, I believe, there is an upgrade kit for the Sierra 1.
There sure is.
It's like $400 or something. It's a little bit...
it's like 700.
Oh, is it really? I must have misread that.
No, that might have been for the pair. You're right.
I think it's $400. So like $400 or something like that. I was like, that is ridiculously expensive for a tweeter and probably a couple of crossover components, or even if it's a whole new crossover.
It's
still
new
really
crossover.
But now that I know it has a woofer in there, okay, that sort of makes a little bit more sense. So the answer to your question is no.
No, it's more than just the tweeter.
More than just the tweeter.
But
and
yes, you can upgrade a Sierra 1 to a Sierra 2. They will send you a new tweeter, a new woofer, and a new crossover for each speaker that you're upgrading.
What do you do with the other stuff?
Well, you can send it back. So far, they're still giving you back a little bit of money for returning the parts. Nowhere near the actual price cost, but at least you can get a little bit back. Kind of covers the cost of shipping it to them, to be honest. It's about all.
Well, that doesn't seem to make much sense. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, you can recycle it instead. But you're not getting much for those returned parts. But it is less expensive than buying Sierra 1s and then buying entire Sierra 2s. It's less expensive than that. So you do have an upgrade path, but yeah, it's all the components.
Lastly, yes, we're still with Justin, not Bieber. Lastly, he's noticed that SVS sells the Dayton wireless subwoofer system for $70. Is it any good? Also, would it cause issues with delay to have one sub in a system wireless and the other one wired? Now, I did a little research on this. It's got 2 reviews over at SVS, and they're very positive.
Yeah.
Then I looked at it over at Parts Express, and they're mostly positive. And I looked at them over at Amazon, and they're pretty evenly positive and negative.
Okay.
So the key here is that everywhere else that sells this thing sells it for cheaper than SVS. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's that.
SVS is selling them for $69, and It's $50, I believe, at both the other two places that I looked at.
Amazon and Parts Express. Yeah.
So I would probably go with one of those if I was going to do that. That being said, the issues that people have with it, it seemed to be pretty standard. If you get it too far away, of course, it doesn't work. But putting it on the ground apparently is a big deal. You can't put it on the ground. If you put it on the ground, it doesn't really work. I don't know why that would be. But the real issue that people are having is that it has to be powered by USB.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's got a USB to wall wart adapter. Yeah.
So the problem people have had is that when the USB port within the little boxes there is not very securely, and it tends to break pretty easily. Okay. So like after you after I unplugged it once, it would never go back on again.
Yeah.
Like, so once you plug that USB cord in there, never unplug it. That being said, it seems to work fine when it's working. Yeah. Everybody's happy with it when it works, but when it stops, there are some issues.
I see the appeal. It's certainly a lot less expensive than the ones we've mentioned, which are the Outlaw Audio or the Audio Engine.
Right.
Those are both, $150 little kits there. So,
for $150, you could buy 3 of these.
Yeah.
And just go through them and never
swap
unplug
them out if they ever break. Yeah.
Or you can buy one of the better ones which don't have the issues. So it seems to be an okay system from what I can read.
If you do buy it from SVS, at least you can return it.
You get to return it if you get it from Amazon too.
Amazon, that's true.
I would buy it from Amazon, honestly. Sorry, SVS. But you guys are marking it up too much. All right. Infinite Gary is getting a 65-inch LG B6 Series OLED after all.
Of course he is.
Surprise of absolutely nobody on this podcast. Good on you, Gary.
So much prodding, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. Really had to push
seriously, congrats, though. You're getting an awesome
You're going to have an awesome TV. Anyways, he's planning to mount it exactly where he currently has his Kuro Plasma that will be put at 12.6 feet away from his eyes. Will the 4K resolution look any crisper than the 1080p Kuro? And what sort of resolution increase would actually be visible from that distance with that size of screen?
12.6 So 12 and a half feet away from a 65-inch diagonal screen gives you about a 21-degree field of view, roughly. Now, if we go back to the whole thing of your eyes need a gap of 1 arc minute, 1/60th of a degree between any 2 dots. You need a gap of 1 arc minute between 2 dots to actually see them as 2 dots. That would mean you need 1273 horizontal resolution. So think 1280, like 1280 by 720, right? You don't even need that much. You need 1273 to get down to the point where you might start to see individual pixels. If you have any more than 1273 going across, you will never see an individual pixel. So going from 1080 or 1920, in fact, right? Because it's 1920 across, up to 3840, you'll never see that. You'll never, ever see that from this distance, from 12 and a half feet away. You will just never see that. However, the OLED could definitely look crisper than the Kuro. Nothing to do with the resolution. Everything to do with enhanced contrast. Like
I think he's going to think it looks better.
Contrast.
I'll be honest with you. I think he's going to look at that thing and think it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to be. I don't think it's going to be because of the resolution. Nah. I think there's a lot of other stuff that's going to be going on there. But that being said, it's still going to look great. So you're going to be very happy with it. Now, Rob said via email that if he could afford an LG OLED, he'd go for the G6 series, which is the most expensive.
It is.
Why? Does it look better than the B6 series in some way? Or is it just that Rob can't help but spend the most money possible on every single thing?
No, I would get the B6 if it had all the features I want. The B6 doesn't do 3D. Doesn't do 3D. Only the C6, E6, and G6 series do, but the C6 series is curved, so it's out.
No, it's out.
And then the E6 series has a soundbar thingy on the bottom of it, which is non-detachable. The soundbar thingy is always there. And in my setup, I have this gigantic Horizon center speaker that I need to put below my flat panel. I need the small...
Anything's detachable if you try hard enough.
Well, there's that, yes. But I need the smallest bezel possible so I can fit my monster center channel below it, which leads me to the G6, which does have a soundbar thingy, but that is removable. In fact, you must remove it to mount it because it flips up on the back and becomes the wall mount. It's kind of a cool design. So that's the only reason I'm hoping in the future they will have, 3D is probably not even going to be on next year's at all. So maybe I have to buy one of these G6s before they disappear. It's just so I can have my passive 4K 3D 3D. I must have it.
So useless.
But no, LG has said all of these panels, the G6, E6, C6, B6, they should all have essentially the same picture quality when it comes to like 2D and
Except for the
HDR.
curved one, because that one obviously
well, it's curved,
yeah, curved and crappy. All right, the LG B6 OLED is a smart TV and has a bunch of streaming services built in. How should Gary get the audio from the TV to his Anthem D2V processor? What input should he use? Now, the question I have, because I'm sure the LG has it, is does the Anthem have audio return channel?
It does not.
Oh, well, there you go. Then optical?
Optical.
That's what I would do.
The LG TV has an optical output, an optical audio output. You send that to the Anthem D2V, which has 3 optical inputs. They are labeled 1, 2, and 3, and you can assign them to any input name that you want. So you will go into the settings of the Anthem. You will select an input name that you are not currently using for any other source. I would suggest one of the 4 possible TV named inputs. There's TV1, TV2, TV3, TV4. Select whichever one you are not currently using and say, I use an optical audio input on this input. And there you go.
There you go. That's what I did for my parents, by the way.
Yeah.
With their TV, because they do the same thing. So, yeah. Lastly, what about when he gets a 4K Blu-ray player or 4K cable service? Will he have to send video directly to the display, bypassing this Anthem, and then send audio separately to the Anthem? The answer is yes.
Yes.
But I think what he's thinking of is, now maybe I'm misreading this, is that he's going to connect via an HDMI up to his TV and then use the optical out to go back down.
No.
Don't do that. No. Because then you'll be losing all that high-res audio. 2
HDMI outputs from the source device.
Which means you may need one of those matrix switchers we were talking about earlier that has 4 and 2 out.
You shouldn't have to. Because, I mean, like all the Ultra HD Blu-ray players so far have 2 HDMI outputs.
And 4K cable service, first of all,
I don't know
hold
about
your breath for that one. But I don't think you're going to have two HDMI.
Maybe.
Oh, it's going to look all kinds of terrible. Let's be honest. They can't even do high definition. Are you kidding me? Let's be reasonable. It's gonna look awful.
But yeah, as far as an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, the Samsung and the Panasonic that are both available now, they both have 2 HDMI outputs. You will, in this case, because the Anthem D2V processor that Gary owns does not have HDCP 2.2, it does not have HDMI 2.0A. So to get high dynamic range and, in fact, a 4K image at all because of the copy protection, you need to send the video directly from the Ultra HD Blu-ray player to your new fancy LG OLED display. Yes, I'm envious of it. The video needs to go directly to it and then send a second HDMI connection to the Anthem D2V just for audio. That's the way to do it.
Trent.
Yes. This is long, but we got to nail this out and then we'll be done.
All right. Trent says, thanks for the show and all the great work. He has spent the last year setting up his home theater and says he has used our advice many times. He has been using a 7.1 set of Premier Acoustics PA8 speakers that he has owned and enjoyed for 8 years. Oh, it's nice synergy there, 8 and 8.
Yeah.
When he added 4 Tannoy in ceiling speakers for Atmos, he was shocked at how much clearer and more musical they sounded as paint speakers. Ain't that a kick in the pants? He went out and listened and narrowed down the choice to Golden Ear and the Send Acoustics Sierra Royal Series speakers.
All right.
Wow, you're popular today, Rob. His screen is 133-inch diagonal fixed frame, 2.35 to 1, non-acoustically transparent, and he sits 14 feet away.
Yeah, non-acoustically transparent.
That, which means they can't put anything behind anything. I mean, you could, but it wouldn't be good. He's got it set to exactly where he wants it, but it leaves him only 40 inches of space below where the front 3 speakers can go. As such, many tower models won't fit. So that needs to be kept in mind. Yeah. His room is 21.5 feet long, 12 feet wide, 10 feet high. It's a pair of SVS PC 2000 cylinder subwoofers in diagonally opposite corners that he says kills the room, with no fear that they'll blow up like his PA 150 sub did. They will not. They will. Your room will die before they subs do. So bass output is another big concern for the speakers, and he decided he didn't care for the sound of the Golden Ears built-in powered subs in their some of their tower models. Anyways, I'm not shocked.
Set up in a showroom where they were the only things playing bass. Going back to the person who was considering no subwoofers, Bill's friend.
He did like the Triton 7 towers a lot, including their smaller height, which would allow them to fit below screen, and the way they are already raked back a little bit to tilt them upwards towards the audience since they're short. What he did not like was the lack of a seamless timbre match between the Triton 7s and the SuperSat on-wall speakers.
Interesting.
Which are attractive to use as surrounds, but not if they don't blend perfectly with the fronts. Meanwhile, the Sierra 2 speakers sound more neutral, but they are expensive at $1,500 a pair versus $1,400 a pair for the Tritons. Less efficient and would have to go on stands to be at to go on stands and be below ear level, which means you just have to tilt them up. It's not big of a deal.
Yeah, rake them back.
Yeah. So number one, that's all the setup here. All right.
Yes. Yeah.
So first of all, $1,400 versus $1,500 a pair, not that big of a deal. I'm sorry.
No,
I don't really. I mean, it's a little bit of money.
Is $100.
Yeah. Right. Should he be concerned about the differing efficiency ratings? As Premier Acoustics are rated at 93 dB and the Tritons are rated at 89, and Sierra 2s are rated at 86. He's using the Denon AVR X7200W to power the 7-floor speakers, and the Yamaha RX V563 to power the 4 Atmos speakers. He's got 2 receivers. All right.
2 receivers, yeah, but one's just powering the 4 Atmos speakers.
Yeah, he's thinking the Sierra 2s would need 4 times as much power as the Premier Acoustics, but he rarely listens louder than -5 dB on his master volume.
You don't have to worry.
You were at 21 by what, 12?
12, yeah.
There is literally no speaker I could think of.
Yeah, he's sitting like 14 feet away, he says, from eyes to screen, but his speakers, he said in his email, he has his speakers in front of the screen, so it's about 12 feet from where he's sitting to the speakers.
If you had like an entry-level Denon, I would still not be worried, to be honest with you, but you've got the X7200. Clearly, these are not going to have problems powering any speaker in the room this size, as far as I'm concerned.
No, I can tell you this. If you got the least efficient ones that he mentioned, which are the Sierra 2s, they are the smallest out of all of these, and not surprisingly, technically the least efficient, you could play them back at full reference volume. Now, yes, full reference volume includes peaks, momentary peaks as loud as 105 dB. But the average is supposed to be 85 dB, and in fact, a lot of times it's even quieter than 85 dB. These could play 85 dB all day long, and you'll need about 3 watts. Not a problem.
It'll be fun.
Yeah.
All right. He says he can get the Sierra Horizon RAL Center. He's certain it has efficiency and output capabilities to send this by the ease, but it costs a lot more. So you don't have to do that. We just explained why.
No, the Sierra 2s at this distance, in this size of room, no problem. Yeah. You don't have to go larger.
Anyways, he liked these 2 speakers, but it's not as though he was able to hear every speaker that's out there. Is he overlooking a better option in this same sort of price range that would fit his 40-inch height limitation? Any speaker, any bookshelf speaker at all, basically.
Well,
any of those,
possibly, I suppose. Yeah.
Any of those would actually also be a perfectly valid option here. Any of them.
I do believe, though, if he found himself, because it's not as though these were the only 2 speakers he listened to. So if he found himself, after the comparisons he made, leaning towards Golden Ear and the Sierra 2s, and part of the reason he liked the Golden Ears was just the physical size of the Triton 7s, but ultimately found the Sierra 2s more neutral, for their $100 price premium, like, you'll probably wind up preferring them to most other speakers, because if you were drawn to some of the aspects of them, which are the super fast transient response, which is common to both of them, and that ribbon tweeter type of sound, which is sort of the characteristic thing you ultimately end up liking, I suspect that's what you'll end up preferring in the long run. So if you already have heard these and you know you like them, then I have very little qualms about saying go for it.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
I wouldn't be like, in other words, I don't have anything where I'm going, oh, no, you don't get those, get these instead. Like, no, you've made a very good choice either way.
It does seem to me that if you're liking the Tritons because of their shape, that's not the right reason to buy a speaker.
No, but I mean, they sound good too. So
I'm sure they sound fine, but they are not meant to be as neutral as other speakers are.
He's right that, it's not just the front speaker. He's talking about 11 speakers total. He's going to be keeping the Tannoy overheads, of course, but he's talking about 7 speakers to put around him. And he's a person who does care about having that, if he can get it, having the timbre match all around him. And it's like, well, the ones he would be putting on the wall as the surrounds, he didn't feel matched well enough to the fronts. It's like, well, Ascen's got those Sierra Sat speakers coming up. They're not here just yet, but Dave's hoping to have them out in the summer. They'll be more expensive. They will be. They will be more expensive, but they're using that same RAL ribbon tweeter in wall mountable little speakers in the Sierra Sats. That will sound glorious.
Not to sound too much like a fanboy there. He mounted his surround back speakers quite high and above a door. He angled them down a bit, but he hears a reflection off the front of his room that makes it seem as though the sound is coming from in front of him rather than behind him. He plans to lower them. Will that fix the issue?
So I'm going to try and have some pictures up in the YouTube feed if Tom wants to click on me so that these will show up. But yes, he does have his surround back speakers. They are mounted, or at least one of them is above a door, and then the other one is the same height. So they're up there. And yeah, we talked about this last week when we started with the 6.1 setups having that central surround back speaker that many people said, it sounds like it's coming from my front center speaker and not from behind me. This can happen. You know, the sound is shooting above you, hits the front wall, or in his case, his gigantic projection screen, reflects off of that and sounds to your ear like it's coming from in front of you rather than behind you.
Yeah, I don't know that lowering them is going to make any difference. Plus, what are you going to put on a door? Not really sure what's going to happen with that. But I would think that if you've got some room behind, do we know if he has any room behind the projection screen?
Well, he does mention that he's got a hollow back there, which is
I would think that you need to put some absorption up front is what you need to do in anywhere that you can.
It's a bit tough because that screen is that screen.
Yeah,
it's acting as your reflective surface up at the front.
You could also angle them. Well, you don't want to do that. You could angle them more down, or
yeah. No, looking at them, you know, I'm not sure how clear the image will show up, but they like a bipolar or a diffuse speaker? They're angle wedgie type.
They are wedgie looking, but it doesn't. I don't see anything on the sides.
Yeah, no, they seem to. I'm not sure. I guess maybe they just made them that shape to make them that shape, so they'd look like wall sconces, and then have everything forward firing. Yeah, I mean, you could try turning them upside down first of all to make sure the tweeter's on the bottom rather than on the top.
What that is. Is that a port?
I don't know. I don't really know what's going on with these speakers, to be honest with you. But yeah, I'd have the tweeter on the bottom if you could, and then angle them down even more.
That's kind of what I would go for, angle them down a little even more. And if you've got room behind that projection screen, put some absorption up there somehow.
Yeah,
I don't think lowering them is going to make any difference unless you.
I mean, if you put them at ear level, it sure would.
Well, if you did that, but yeah, I don't think so. I think if you're getting the bounce, you're getting the bounce. Just change the angle on them at all. I mean, that's the first thing you want to do is change the angle, because clearly you're having a problem with them bouncing, and he's got a lot of really hard reflective surfaces in this room.
He does.
No absorption to fix it. So I'll leave these pictures up, and then we'll read on. So he says he doesn't have any acoustic panels yet. He prioritized speakers first. So should he switch that and prioritize room treatments? Probably. Honestly, you probably need to put something up in this room. If you're having those sorts of issues, that's going to be a real. I think
same time working big to small, the speakers are going to make. I mean, the speakers we're talking about
are going to make a huge.
Are going to make a bigger difference than adding acoustic treatments and keeping his current speakers. That's for sure.
Oh right, yes, but you know, a half dozen panels in that room would make a massive difference. You know, 6 panels in that room.
Still not as much as changing the speakers would, though.
What I'm saying is that it doesn't cost that much for 6 panels. If you're thinking of spending $1,500 and all this other stuff, get yourself. You don't have to fully treat this room like with a professional and stuff like that. Throwing up a few panels, first reflection points, front wall, back wall, if you can. Would make a huge difference.
But yeah, this definitely is a reflective looking room. Certainly at some point. So I'll say my vote would be to get the speakers first. Tom's would be to do the panels first and just wait a little while on the speakers. I think arguments can be made either way, so pick the one that favors what you feel like doing. But definitely at some point you need some acoustics treatments in here. This is a reflective room.
Yes, it is. All right. Can wait. I'm turning off this. Okay, you can put yourself back on because I turned that off.
Oh,
all right. He isn't planning on a lot of panels, just the side wall first reflection points in the back wall. Is this enough? Probably not, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't think so, honestly. Would one large panel on each side wall work, or should he get smaller ones? Well, they usually come in either 2x2 or 2x4
Yes.
feet. So you're going to need half a dozen of the 2x4, 4-inch thick ones is what I would get. And, or 2 inches with 2 inches off the wall or whatever.
Yeah.
I would put one of those vertically at the first reflection points. In this room, I'd probably put at least a couple on the back wall.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have any, I think you could probably put one above the screen. I'm thinking, is it still the picture of this thing?
Well, I'm putting it up because he does have a question about one side wall in particular. So I have an image up to show what he's talking about, sort of.
Kind of. I see a projector. All right. Anyway, he also has a spare outlet on the right side wall that he'd like to hide behind.
That's what's just peeking out on the bottom of this image. You can see there's a little outlet on the right side wall there. So he'd like to cover that up with a panel just for a visual thing.
I can't see it because your pictures,
okay.
Yeah, covering it up. Anyways,
it's teeny tiny in the image.
That's fine. So, yeah, that's what I would do.
Yeah, just eyeballing it, it looks like if you had, two 2x4 panels, in other words, a 4x4 foot area on each side wall. One, that would be nicely effective, and two, it looks like that would reach far enough back to cover up that additional outlet. So yeah, I'm thinking, a half dozen panels that are 2x4, 2 feet by 4 feet. Stick 2 of them on your back wall and stick 2 on each side wall. That's a good starting place.
Yeah, if you get 8 and get a couple up front, that would be fantastic too.
Yeah.
While the screen covers most of the entire front wall, there's a hollow space behind it. Should he fill that with insulation? What effect would doing so have when the screen is not acoustically transparent? Well, it would be great for bass trapping.
Yes.
Let's just start with that.
That's right.
So believe me, the bass doesn't give 2 craps about that screen of yours. That bass doesn't even know that screen is in this room. So yes, I would fill that up with insulation and use it as a ginormous bass trap. That could also very much help your reflection problems. Probably not, but perhaps. So
yeah, no, it's a fine idea, and it doesn't have to be. You're not looking at it. You're not going to see it. So get the cheapest. It could be that super cheap white fluffy insulation that they always throw above garages. That's like the cheapest insulation that's out there. Still totally fine for this purpose. So yeah. Fill up that hollow.
Oh wait, that's the same thing. Lastly, he just wanted to comment that watching Ultra HD content on his JVC RS500 looks excellent, even though the JVC uses E shift or the Wobble K rather than a true 4K panel. He says UHD adds a lot of detail and HDR adds a lot of realism. So for people who are wondering whether they need to spend 10 grand on a genuine 4K panel projector in order to enjoy the benefits of Ultra HD, Trent definitely feels the less expensive JVC delivers the goods.
And there you go.
There we go. So
from a guy who owns one.
The guy who owns one. There you go.
By the way, the RS500 is from the reference series. That's part of the JVC Pro line. The sister model to that in the regular JVC line is the X750. So they are identical.
Honestly thought we were going to get through all these questions today. I'm surprised that we did not.
Well, we still got more, but...
I know. That's what I'm saying. I thought we were going to.
Oh,
it's 11 o'clock and it's over. We're ending this podcast.
Yes, we are.
Talk anymore. All right. So we have to say to Tyler and Gabe, who just wanted us to remind people of stuff, Steve the Geek, and Nick, we will get to you next week.
We sure will.
All right. So, guys, sorry about that, but we will answer your questions. It is only a matter of time. If you want to have your question answered on the podcast, all you have to do is ask. Ask by emailing question@avrant.com. You can also email rob@avrant.com or tom@avrant.com. Go to www.avrant.com to leave us a comment. Go to facebook.com/avrant podcast. Interact with us, and Twitter @FirstReflect for Rob, @avrant_Tom for me, and @Aus10 Pond for our producer Austin, who also has his own podcast. It is the We Watch Movies podcast. It is a podcast about the creation and use of envelopes.
Okay. Didn't we? Wasn't it a postal service thing at one point?
Not envelopes specifically. So shut up.
No, it is now. I'm just seeing if there was if it ever was related. We watch movies. I don't know.
I don't know.
It's tough to tell what they talk about over there.
It's really They should work on that. All right. We want to thank again our listeners of the week, James D, Gary, Jonathan, Nathan, Edward, and Trent for their donations. Thank you guys.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you guys so much. We really do appreciate it.
All right. Nine years and 1 week down. We will see you guys next week. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.